Let's get ready for Wrestling Day! It's another episode of the Top of Wrestling podcast. Thanks for joining us again. It's me, it's Professor Rex Youngblood. And today, we have a great show on deck. Last week, we talked about the top 25 world champions. And we got a lot of great feedback, and we know I will automatically go ahead and say right now before I even forget, because sometimes I have that kind of memory, unfortunately. Rashawn Hilton messaged me, and he named 5 guys. 4 out of the top 5 that he named were in our top 4 or 5 as well. So I thought that was awesome. So we appreciate this feedback. This is good. Let's grow off of it. Let's argue, because I feel like we're going to argue just a little bit today, because today's topic is top 25 non-world champions. Guys that just didn't get the chance to actually be the world champion. But quick plugs here. Do want to say thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure you are listening right now on a couple of different platforms. We know we have Spotify, iTunes, Google Play Music. We have YouTube. I know that some people are listening to us, even checking us out on Facebook through all these different links. Podbean, iTunes, I think I already said that, but hey, we got a lot more, and we're excited that you guys keep listening, keep downloading. It means everything to us. So without further ado, as you guys know, as we always do, let's bring out the man. Let's bring out the myth. Let's bring out the legend, Mr. O.D.M.
Please, King Maxwell, take it away!
Yes! Thank you, Professor, for allowing me to be here. It is truly wonderful! Yes! Due to my condition, I am trapped in this mortal vessel called O.D.M. But after experiencing my broken brilliance, he will soon be deleted! What's going on, man?
O.D.M., thanks for joining us today, and you brought along a little bit of brokenness with you. I dig it.
A little bit. You know, it's funny, getting hyped up for this, I was watching some of his old stuff, and I happened to catch the one episode of Monday Night Raw where it was a promo between Woken Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt, and they just went back and forth, and by the end they were both laughing. One of the best promos in recent history.
I remember exactly what you're talking about. Right before he got Wyatt to turn and become a tag team partner of his, when they did have the series of matches with each other. I remember that, where he kept interrupting. They both kept interrupting each other's video promos. It was awesome. I remember that. Well, hey, glad that you're here today with us again. And I did not get stumped again, which means that we keep this going. The streak is alive. Let's see. We're on episode number, 10 today? I believe we are, yes.
Yeah, it is number 10.
Wow.
Double digits.
Time flies.
There might not be a next episode after this one, though, because we're going to butt heads on this one.
I want to argue, but I don't think... Well, the funny thing about the two of us is, we give a little bit here and there each week. We let you know where we're from, kind of a little bit here, but we'll both say right now, we are FBI. We are full-blooded Italian, so we are about ready to fight with each other today.
It's due.
Because, it all started with the list, and I'm not going to lie, it all started with... Actually, you pissed me off today. I'm not going to lie. You already pissed me off today. So, again, a little bit of the kayfabe here, everybody. Behind, we behind closed doors, we record this on Monday. We release this for you on Wednesdays. last night was NXT Takeover, and a tremendous show that it was. And I get a text from ODM. Now, as I remind you guys, I do travel all the time while he is in New York, and I get it. The show starts late for him, so he's got to get on it right away. I do understand that. I have a little bit more time when it comes to the Pacific time. I could, fire it up a little bit later where I'm at out here in the West Coast. And he texts me. I didn't even remember what time it was. Thankful for that. And he says, match of the year. I go, shut the fuck up. I don't want to hear anything, man. Just stop. And then he said, it was funny. He sends an emoji back with his hand over his mouth, which I said, that's really good. But you did good, man. You did really, really good. Kinda. Well, it's not your fault. I'm mad at you, but I'm not mad at you. So, anybody who is listening to this show, you're a big fan. You already caught Takeover. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward to what pissed me off, maybe a little bit. Not pissed me off with the show. Great show. Not a bad match on the entire card. We're going to run that down in a moment. So I had the opportunity I do have a day job, so I had a little bit of time working with my day job. I had a little bit of time watching NXT Takeover. Also had a little bit of time where I was getting things ready for the podcast. You should never mix both. The podcast work and a show. I go to drop my own personal notes in for today's show just to get ready for our podcast, things of, this week in wrestling history. And I scroll down too much just to see Adam Cole defeats Tommaso Ciampa. Johnny Gargano turns heel. I go, what the fuck? I watched everything but that match up to that moment. And I go, I'm going to put my notes in. I'm going to watch this match. And we're good, man. I'm going to be ready for this show. I go, are you kidding me?
I purposely waited until then to put them in there, figuring by then you would have caught it.
No, this is nothing against you, man. That's my own stupidity. Again, that's on my own. I was pissed. And I go, it would have been great to see it happen. But even still, I did watch it. Sure. And I have a theory as to what's going to happen. You know what? Fuck it. Let's just go right now. I'm going to tell you my theory. WrestleMania weekend, here we go. Gargano, yeah, he just cost Tommaso Ciampa the championship, right?
Okay.
I don't think that we're going to have another Ciampa versus Gargano one-on-one match, especially WrestleMania weekend. We've seen it before, not bad. But Baylor, he did beat Gargano. I think we are going to see a fatal four-way at TakeOver. We're going to see Adam Cole defend his title against Finn Balor, against Johnny Gargano, and Tommaso Ciampa. Again, Ciampa has not officially been pinned really in a clean fashion to say that he's lost his title. He, had to give it up the first time. This time got fucked over by his friend Johnny Gargano. And just a couple of weeks ago, they had a great match at Worlds Collide with as DIY took on Mustache Mountain. But he didn't say, yeah, let's get back together. Let's do it. Ciampa said, yeah, for old time's sake. Sounds good. And, I didn't think they were going to feud this quick, but wow. A little bit of a twist, though, because last time the roles were reversed. One was heel, one was face, so now we're reversing it. So I do think we are going to see a fatal four-way heading into TakeOver. But again, not your fault as to what happened, but that was pretty funny. You know what, but we'll make it kind of a part of news. Keith Lee, he retained over Dominik Dijakovic. We know that, which was... Can I ask you now, is that the match? Wait, before I even go on and ask you this question, before we go through all this, after the first two matches, because the second match was... No, I'm sorry. Was the second match a street fight?
Yeah.
Okay. The first and third match, which is, Baylor and then Gargano, I don't know which one he said would have been match of the year. Then I seen the tag team match. I go, Jesus, I don't know, man. Any one of these really could have been a good match of the year. They were all great matches. But, so I'm going to quickly say we know that the Broserweights, they won the tag team titles. Bianca Belair fell short to try to beat Rhea Ripley, and we know what's going to happen from there. I'll let you take over on that when we talk news. But also, Keith Lee retained over Dominik Dijakovic, and Finn Balor defeated Gargano in a fucking awesome match. Go ahead, man. Take me through what happened this weekend.
It was so Man, I don't even know where to start. First thing I like to say is,
start with this. What was your match of the year? I need to know. What you just go ahead and kick it off with.
it was Keith Lee, Dijakovic. Balor and Gargano was out of this world. It was the pacing and the way the match changed. It started off slow. Balor was doing a lot of rest holds, and then it just kicked into overdrive. A lot of false finishes. For a second there, I almost thought Gargano was going to take it, and I think the best part of that match was the end, when Balor just stood over him, kept choking him, and Gargano was swatting him away like he was really pissed. Great stuff. But Lee Dijakovic was amazing. It was amazing. And the in-ring storytelling was great. Because there's two guys that everybody already knows what they can do. They move like cruiserweights. They hit like big guys. The match had all of that. And they just kept topping each other and hulking. They both kept hulking up, which was great. And in the end, Dijakovic was just beaten. He tried to go the extra step, and he couldn't, and Lee took advantage and won. And then, the respect after the match, I just think it was the total package. This event, this entire takeover, is a textbook example of how to properly perform in-ring storytelling. Every single match told a story. And they did it well.
And they all had stories leading into them. I mean, even one thing I wrote down that I absolutely loved is that the Dakota Kai Tegan Knox street fight, they kept pushing how much this is the very first ever street fight for women on NXT on one of the takeovers. That video package ahead of time reminded me of SummerSlam 2002. Where in black and white you see the old days of Hunter and Shawn hugging up against each other, being DX, being all, chummy. And then the time where Triple H turns on Shawn Michaels leading to their match.
Yep.
How that whole build, that whole video package was, it was awesome. It showed us that best friend kind of package, how they were together. Everything that happened at War Games, and then how it just kept building from there. Now, a couple of weeks back, you weren't on the show, and I do remember talking about this, and I wish you were on there to talk about it. But one of the cool things was that, not Tegan Knox, I'm sorry.
Dakota Kai?
Dakota Kai came out with her video package of beating Tegan Knox, which I thought was absolutely awesome.
That was brilliant.
So I was hoping to see that again for TakeOver. I was like, oh, this is going to be really cool. Nope, she jumps her before the match even had a second to begin, before she even got even a quarter of the way through the ramp, which I thought was awesome. I was like, okay, good way to start this. And then at the end, we see the debut of, is it Raquel Gonzalez?
Yep.
So I actually, about maybe 20 to 35 seconds prior to that, said, with how this looks right here, I could see someone showing up, but who's going to come and help her? I was trying to think of who would maybe be on her side. I like it. A new debut. It kind of almost is like a Diesel to Shawn Michaels, right? You need that muscle behind you, and that's kind of what she is. I thought that was a really cool twist to the end of that fight. Again, like you said, storytelling, and it keeps going. I'm ready to see more of them now. Most people, how many times would you want to see the same women fight over and over? I mean, we've seen all the same things on Raw, SmackDown over and over, right?
Yeah.
And it's after a while, it's whatever. Yeah, we've seen this match, but the way the storytelling is going, it's building and building. We just went to a street fight. Who knows what's going to happen WrestleMania weekend? I'm excited for that.
Oh yeah,
I think you're absolutely right that the big man match is match of the year worthy. I think I think a couple of things could even have rivaled it already this year, but I think that it's a very early stretch to call it that. I think it's definitely going to be probably one of WWE's best produced matches of the year, top 10 guaranteed.
Yeah, I saw. That was the opening match, so seeing that, it was funny because I was finishing dinner, so I had it on my phone while I was moving around and stuff. And right as dinner was ready, or about to be ready, it was getting to the end of the match, and it started with me like pausing in the middle of making dinner, watching. My older son coming in, standing over my shoulder watching, my younger son coming in and watching, and then Jackie, my wife, came in. And so it ended with all four of us watching, and it was just, that's how epic the end was. Now, after seeing the Balor match, it's like, wow, okay, maybe I spoke too soon about my match of the year qualification, and then the tag team match, and then the main event. So, nonetheless,
whole show delivered. That's the point.
This has got to be what, top 3 Takeover? Top 5 at least, all time?
You mean full event of takeovers?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Overall?
You know what? It's funny because I started mapping out our next several shows heading into, this year. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is either top NXT matches or top takeover events, because honestly, you could go to any one of them right now, toss them on, and be absolutely fine with it.
I say we do that after WrestleMania.
I would love to. Let's do it right after WrestleMania.
That
we'll talk all the best.
That one's going to be in there too. You got to figure.
Oh yeah. So here's the issue. All right. We call this the Top of Wrestling podcast. I mean this for a very serious. I'm being very serious when I say this. We call it the top because we want to talk about the positive. We say there's a lot of crap out there nowadays. Unfortunately, a lot of it lies on Raw and SmackDown when it comes to, some of the stupid storylines that we see. However, NXT, end of the day, it is under the WWE umbrella. It's been well produced. Every one of their shows, TV shows, takeovers have just been outstanding. One thing is that I used to be on a wrestling radio show back home in New York, and one thing that irked me so bad was every week just complaining and bitching and moaning about they should be doing this, they should be doing that, I can't believe they did this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, we should just accept what we're getting, right? Even if Roman Reigns is being pushed down your throat, right? Granted, how can we accept it? What can be the good out of it? And that's what we're looking to do with this podcast here. We could bitch all day long, but at the end of the day, you don't want to listen to it because, yes, we're all going to agree. We'll have things to bitch about. We'll bring up our things, but we're not going to make this a bitch fest the entire time we're on this show. That being said, someone I saw, a good friend of mine who is a good wrestling colleague from back home, wrote, I really think the show really didn't get started until Balor and Gargano. I think Lee and Dijakovic was overrated. And I go, see, that's just negativity shit, man. For what reason is that overrated? That was 2 big men, and I said it to myself. I sat there thinking during the match, I can't remember the last time a really good big man match happened. And I don't have to go really, really far back. I'll say maybe 2012-ish. Big Show and Sheamus, they put on some good barn burners. Show has been a part of some really good matches, for a big guy.
Sure.
So is Sheamus. Guys like that. Batista's a big guy, but when you're talking about Lee, he's not your. I don't want to talk anything about his weight, but all right, he's not.
He's like Vader.
There you
Almost.
go. Yeah, and he could do the flips like Vader. Yes, You're absolutely right. Yes, well, even more so. I mean, he's
more so,
unbelievably. Yeah. He's Vader like 2 or 3,
Cubed.
3.0. Yeah. Dijakovic grew on me. I wasn't a fan, not necessarily at first, but his series of matches with Keith Lee were awesome. This match, here's the only complaint I have. If a guy of Dijakovic's stature can do a corkscrew off the top rope, that should be the end. If you are not finishing the match with it, don't use it.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think it's special to use it when you're gonna win. When you had to pull it out, that was your last opportunity. Because now I feel like we're gonna almost expect to see a lot of those moves out of these guys. I don't want to see dives and flips from everybody, and unfortunately, there were a good amount of flips and high-risk type moves in a big man match, but I wouldn't complain about it, Eva. I'd go watch it again right now. I think it was a great match. I think on the entire card, top 2 matches for me were the tag team match and the Keith Lee. I'm sorry. Balor Gargano and the Keith Lee Dijakovic match. Third
Agreed.
would be the tag team match. Fourth is Adam Cole Ciampa. And that's only because just how those other matches, I think I knew heading in, there's no way Cole's losing this. Undisputed, you already said it last week. If Undisputed Era loses those tag team titles with Strong and everybody already loses, there's no way Cole's going to lose it. He's keeping it. You called it. So even while watching the match, even though you fucking spoiled it a little bit in the news for me, you did or didn't. With that being said, I already knew that Cole was not going to lose that match. So that's why I say intensity, surprise factor, tag team match was, I think, better than the main event. And Dijakovic and Lee.
Yeah, I'm going Dijakovic and Lee. I'm watching that as soon as we're done recording. It was enjoyable. It was just, you could say it was a spot fest, but it wasn't like an indie spot fest or an AEW spot fest. It was, we're going to give you something to wow. The crowd was great. The announcers were great. There was one point where Nigel McGuinness had the line of the night. He goes, how many legs could Bobby Fish break if Bobby Fish could break legs? And Mauro and Beth's response, all three of them were in on it, and it was great. It was.
Didn't Beth Phoenix go? She was something like, really?
Yeah. Yeah. And he says, it's a thing, make it a thing, or something like that. And then Mauro jumped in.
I read it. Or, I'm sorry, I heard him say it, and then I wrote it down, and it's funny you beat me to that. That's really funny.
Oh, sorry, that's twice I fucked it up for you.
Hey, that's all right. We're great minds, at least for the first half of the show. You know, am I wrong to say this? Nigel is, I don't want to say a heel announcer. I think he's a realistic announcer, because certain things were happening that, like, let's say a team was getting away with something, and he's like, that shouldn't be happening, blah, blah, blah. Or like even in a street fight, he's like, you can't do that. And Beth's like, it's no rules. What are you talking about? Like, and I thought it was kind of like he's playing that heel-ish announcer in a weird way or something. Not heel, but again, it's maybe realistic. I don't know. I found it to be different, but I like it. It's diverse compared to everybody all just agreeing about the same thing. Kind of like you hear on AEW. Not shitting on AEW, but no one's saying, oh, I really hate this guy while other two guys are liking it. I've always liked that when you had Ross and Lawler, Monsoon and Heenan, or Ventura and McMahon. You had those guys that you argued back and forth. Kind of want to see that a little bit with the NXT team, and I think Nigel could maybe do it because he was a heel wrestling champion. He was great doing promos. Maybe that's happening. I'm just saying I think that's kind of what I was catching, but could also totally be wrong.
Yeah, it at times you could make the correlation because he would say things, positive things about the heels and negative things about the baby faces. So I can see how you would get that feeling. But I think you're right. It seems like they're going to be a little more subtle with it, and it's not just going to be so black and white. It's just going to be something to enable the banter, but at the same time, they can still all be on the same page and react in unison and all that stuff. So
it's funny. I think Corey Graves kind of started that way. He was very subtle. Then he just went full-blown, he had no problem just calling everything out.
He definitely goes tweener. The one thing that I love, though, about Corey Graves is when Byron Saxton is on. Byron Saxton should just be on just so Corey Graves can make fun of him. Mm-hmm. There was, I remember one, I don't remember when this was. It had to be several months ago, maybe 6 months ago. He was making fun of Byron as usual, but he said something. It was so damn funny. And they cut to a different camera view, and you could see Corey Graves in the background, and he's laughing hysterically at the line he just delivered. And it was great. I got to find that.
I am a fan. I know a lot of people not really a big fan of Corey Graves. I think he's an acquired taste. I think he's pretty good for what WWE has right now on there. I think they have a lot of announcers. I don't even know who they are with, like,
yeah, I know,
Vic Joseph, this, that, there. I don't even know who they are anymore. I'm just paying attention to the wrestlers as much as I can pay attention to right now. But you know what? We've talked a little bit about Takeover already. Before we start spoiling everything else, bring us a little bit of news with ODM.
All right. So
today.
today. Well, I'm waiting to see if anything, I'm checking the wire. I'm going to start the first piece of news with a little story. I was at the grocery store the other day, and I'm walking through the aisle, and I hear somebody's cell phone goes off. And you know what it is?
John Cena. Wow, how awesome was that? I said, John, that was awesome. Yes.
And what I wanted to do was just look at the guy and be like, John Cena sucks. But I was too slow-witted as usual, and I just kind of looked at him and gave the head nod and laughed. But
you know why? Do you know why you bitched out on it? Because you don't have hustle, loyalty, or respect.
Yeah, that's probably why. I mean, at least for John Cena, anyway.
Sure.
So, John Cena returning to SmackDown Friday, February 28th. I don't know if you've seen the other reported news, but it seems that his opponent for WrestleMania has been picked. So,
but
if you haven't
do we know who it is going to be?
It's been speculated that it is going to be Elias.
You know what's really funny is that...
It's not funny.
Well...
Not John Cena versus Elias, that's what I meant.
That's not funny. But you know what's really funny is the other day I said to myself, they're probably going to do Cena versus Elias because it's 3 years in the making. Think about this. Last year was the Dr. Thugonomics thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The year before, when he was waiting on The Undertaker, Elias came out and fucked with him. 3 years in the making.
Yeah.
That is stupid if that is exactly what happens. But
exactly. Exactly. The other rumored opponent was Baron Corbin.
All right, cool. Elias, I could go with that.
Next set of news relating to Takeover.
Hang on. Sorry.
You know what really grinds his gears?
No, I'm sorry. I had to fix my microphone. It was I was getting a little bit of weird feedback here. The only way I like Baron Corbin versus Cena, retirement match, and he retires Cena.
Yeah.
2 years in a row, Corbin retires someone. Because, I mean, that's kind of like Lesnar taking that Taker heat off of the streak.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody else could have done it, right?
Yeah.
Corbin already has the worst heat in the world. No one is going to turn and start cheering him to, God, he really deserves a world title run. Fuck it. Boo him. He retired Angle. You all wanted that. Cena comes out and says, I'm going to have my retirement match. People start, all their juices start flowing. Who could it be at WrestleMania? He starts listing people like AJ Styles, this, that, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden out comes Baron Corbin. He goes 2 for 2. That I'm okay with.
Yeah. Like you said, he's got heat good and bad. I've already said it before. I'm a fan. I'd be okay with it. And I think that's
I'm actually I'm a fan of his heel work. The heat that he gets, I'm like, I can't tell if it's good heat or bad heat when you're listening to people booing.
Both,
you know what I mean? Yeah, it is. It's funny.
But I'm cool with that. It only feeds him, and he plays off of it well. So, hey, I'm down with that. Good booking. So,
if we're going to talk about WrestleMania, though, I mean, obviously that's what Cena's coming back for, is something to say something about WrestleMania. Of course, that's why he's coming to SmackDown. I'm sure you heard the other rumor that AJ Styles, it looks like his dislocated shoulder is going to be back in place. So it looks like he's back for WrestleMania. And did you hear who his rumored opponent is going to be?
Hell yeah, I heard, and I'm interested to talk to you. I was actually going to save this because I know I didn't write it in the notes. I was going to save it for the end. But, yes, it is rumored to be Undertaker.
So, okay. It's good and bad. Good, you have the Phenom versus the Phenomenal One. I think that's kind of a cool build. The good news is that I don't think Taker is going to have to do much because I think AJ could just throw himself around the ring and do whatever he needs to. AJ's a fucking pro.
AJ can carry that match.
Yep. I think it's kind of comparable to, I mean, I really think Taker's last really good WrestleMania match was probably one of the ones against Triple H.
Yeah.
His one against Punk, not that, I mean, could have been better, but I think he was slow for the fact that Punk is a fast-paced wrestler.
Sure.
But AJ has, I think, he is a fast-paced wrestler, but he also is a methodical type wrestler. He is his ring work is more psychological, and I think that he could do a different type of game where maybe he's going to try and work on the Undertaker to get that calf. What is it, the calf crusher that he does?
Yeah.
I think it could actually work. I think AJ could really be the one to actually carry a good match with the Undertaker, give him one of his best in years. However, we got to find a way for Undertaker to stop. And I know that as what we heard on the Broken Skull podcast or Broken Skull sessions that are on the network, he said he'll know when he's ready to hang it up. If he's coming in here and taking on AJ Styles, he's not ready to hang it up this year at all, which means that next year, what's happening, and then they just announced that next year is going to be going Hollywood. So I don't know if he'll retire in Hollywood. It would have made much more sense for him to retire in Texas years ago. But I don't know. What are your main thoughts on Taker and AJ Styles?
Yeah, I think AJ can carry the match. I think Undertaker being Undertaker, working with Styles will make him work better than if it was just with somebody else. With Reigns, unfortunately, it was before he had his hip surgery. So he was in a really rough spot then. Since then, he's had his hip surgery. He's doing better. I think working with Styles will make it even better. But like you said, there's got to be a long-term plan. And unfortunately, he's the only one that can make that decision. We can sit here and fantasy book all we want, but it doesn't make a difference. It's going to be him. And unfortunately, at this point, I think it's going to be underwhelming when it happens, because it's going to be one of those things where he's just like, okay, I'm done. And it might not be WrestleMania. So what do you do right now? Corbin, I don't know if, as much as I do like Corbin, I don't know if putting him over the Undertaker is the right move. I'm sure by then, let's say it was next year, you could probably find some people that could do well with beating the Undertaker at WrestleMania, but at this point, it's kind of lost its luster anyway. So at this point, I guess let's just fantasy book the way to have him go out in a cool way, whether it's putting somebody over or not.
I wish that Undertaker would actually go out a little bit kind of like how Juice and Thunder Liger just went out at Wrestle Kingdom. Maybe
Greatest Hits?
Yeah, I think that's really cool. Having if let's say his three biggest opponents, which would be someone like maybe Randy Orton and, someone who can still go, and then some of his best allies that he's ever had in the business that can still go, whoever that may be. I'm not sure. You know what I mean? Maybe Kane. Kane would be there, right? I mean, not many are left. But I think it would be kind of a cool nod to him. Won't happen again, like I said, but I think that would be a great way for him to go out. We'll never get it. But I know there's a couple other pieces of news. What else we got this week?
Another piece from Takeover last night. Charlotte came out and she announced that she will be facing Rhea Ripley for the NXT Women's title at WrestleMania.
First NXT title to be defended at WrestleMania.
What's that?
First NXT title to be
absolutely.
defended at WrestleMania, or even just a first NXT match at WrestleMania.
And it's about damn time. I'm not saying it's got to be equal parts, but sprinkle it in there every once in a while, man. Give us something. If it's going to be 8 hours.
Well, here's the thing. We know that there's going to be a takeover a couple of days before WrestleMania. So we know Rhea Ripley is not going to be defending her title at all at Takeover. There's no reason for it. They're not going to make a switch that quick, and everybody's too... nobody thinks that it would actually happen. So what happens at Takeover? Because if you're going to put the NXT Women's Championship on that card, do you not put the NXT World Championship on there too?
Yeah, well, that one, man, that's a good call. I think, play it. I say play it smooth.
Just the one match.
Keep it simple. Yeah, there's a reason behind it, right? There was motivation. What the booking decision in the back is to me irrelevant. Let's look at it this way. Charlotte won the Rumble, which we didn't want. But give us something new now. Give us Charlotte versus Ripley. That's great. My fear is Charlotte's going to win the NXT title. I don't want that. Bianca Belair is coming up. She's fantastic. What do you do with her? Because if you give her another title shot and she loses again, now what? She can't close the deal? The booking's going to be very interesting. There's no reason other than to put another title match, the NXT title match, on WrestleMania. So why do it? Like I said, there's a reason that the women's one is happening. Just leave the men's title on Takeover. Let it main
So
event.
if that's the case, what if, just spitballing, in a non-title match at Takeover, Bianca gets one more shot at Rhea Ripley? If she can beat her, or if she can beat Charlotte at Takeover, whatever the case would be, she gets inserted into the WrestleMania match a couple days later.
Triple
because
threat.
I'm okay with that.
Yep.
More of a on the fly, but it keeps you involved, keeps you invested watching, especially Takeover just a couple of days before. So I think that would be a viable option. We'll see, because you're right. I don't think it's not time for Belair, but she's hot, man. I mean, that crowd was into her. Nobody saw her winning that title, but they still were behind her. The EST chants are there, and Triple H even said something post Takeover that she's not done with this NXT title. So we'll find out where it goes from here. I'd like to see her involved, but if not, if it is just Ripley and Charlotte, hey, that's gonna be a great match as well. I think you said that you'd hate to see Charlotte win. I don't think Charlotte's gonna win. I think Charlotte is going to. I think Charlotte's going to quickly become the Triple H of WrestleMania. I think she's going to start putting people over. She put over Becky last year. I believe she did win. She did win against Asuka, but did she? I think she lost in the match that had Bayley involved, where Bayley won at 33. So, she's not on a she has to win streak at WrestleMania. Is she owed one for last year for carrying that match and the triple threat? Yeah, I think she's kind of owed one for that, which is a great pivot. We might as well say we already know where it looks like the women's championship is going. You know, I mean, a day of recording today is Monday Night Raw. Lord knows what's happening there tonight. I don't even think I really want to read it, because last week, coming out of Monday Night Raw, Shayna Baszler proposed a challenge for WrestleMania to face Buffy the Vampire. I'm sorry, Becky
Jesus.
Lynch. Wow. Okay, I have an issue. I said I was going to be trying to, not be so negative, but let me say this. I find it very odd that you show something live on the USA Network. Blood. You have it look like she bit her neck. Of course, we know it's a capsule or something like that. However she did it. Looked good. The way Becky's hair was drenched, it really looked like it was a real bite, which I thought was cool. Played out very well. My issue is that it went black and white on all forms of your social media afterwards, and not all forms, but a good chunk of them. I believe on Hulu it was edited a little bit as well. Maybe it wasn't.
Nope.
No,
It was
okay.
full effect. I watched it the next day.
Oh, okay. But I do know they did some editing on certain platforms.
Yeah, I could see that.
But why?
Probably has to do with advertising, right? YouTube's like, nope, we don't want that. So, the advertising that we're giving you. Listen, I get what you're saying, right? Because
Have you ever searched YouTube?
If
you find some really fucked up shit on there, man.
But they don't have the same sponsors as WWE. But I get what you're saying, because if it broadcasted live on USA, you can't tell me that the advertisers on YouTube are any bigger or more influential than the ones advertising on USA. So maybe it was just for effect. Maybe like, oh, you missed a big one. We're only going to show you a piece, or we're going to change the color so you don't get the full effect. It's probably just a teaser.
It is funny, though, that we know Drew McIntyre is going to be heading to WrestleMania for Lesnar. And, we have a little bit of a build. We had MVP involved last week, things like that. But 2 years in a row, man, the women really get you going. Last year was, think about all that Damn the man, screw the woo, no more Mrs. Nice Bitch, or whatever Rousey said. Then they had that fight backstage where they're kicking out cop car windows.
God, that was great.
It was compelling stuff. Shayna Baszler and Becky Lynch, you're already there. Flair sent a message last night, or, at TakeOver just a couple of days ago. Again, man, the women get you really involved. The storylines are really where it's at when they get you very interested. I'm not really interested in anything when it comes to the world title just yet. We know that it's rumored that the winner of the upcoming Elimination Chamber match is going to be the person to take on Bray Wyatt. That's what's, rumored out there. And I'm not sure if you've seen the rumor or the advertisement that's been out there, but the people that are in that advertisement have people like Roman Reigns, Daniel Bryan, Kofi Kingston. But then I did see that there is Bobby Roode or Robert Roode or whatever. Rob Roode. I don't know what name he is this week. And a couple other guys. So I think we all know Roman Reigns is probably going to outlast everybody and probably head into WrestleMania, take on The Fiend, which I'm absolutely okay with. I think that could be a very good build. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, especially given, how they portray Roman Reigns. It's the eventual choice, right? I mean, where else are you going to go? That's the problem with The Fiend is the way he's been booked. It's going to be difficult to get out of that. He's going to give up the title at some point. Why not Roman Reigns? I mean, if that's where you're heading, that just keep Roman Reigns away from Baron Corbin, please.
Agreed. Now, I will say this, when it comes to this Wyatt match, having matches against Daniel Bryan, he needed that. He needs a good, credible opponent who he can have a good match with, not just someone that is, Seth Rollins, I don't know. I think that Seth is not one way, when it comes to his style, but he wasn't a threat to me when it came to Bray Wyatt or The Fiend. To me, Roman Reigns, that's a threat. We just talk about Lee and Dijakovic. Honestly, you put Reigns and Bray Wyatt at WrestleMania together, both of them are good, fast-paced, big men workers. I think there's a good opportunity that actually, when you really look at the card, I think Lesnar and McIntyre could be good. Either of the women's matches could be very good. Believe it or not, taking a look, projecting right now, Reigns and Wyatt could very well steal the show when it comes to a really good back-and-forth match if they don't do 47 false finishes of Roman Reigns and all that like he normally does. Other than that, I think that he actually could have a very good match with Bray Wyatt, most credible opponent heading in.
Well, pivoting off of that, there was a small report that they could be bringing back the red lighting for the Fiend matches.
Don't do that. No.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. Don't do that. Just stop with the lighting and let's leave it at that.
Oh, man. Right now, this is where in post-production I really want to insert Michael Scott. No! God, no! I'm not going to. Maybe next time we'll use it. But oh, my God. For real? Come on. Stay away from that.
I know.
It's been better without it.
I had a couple small things. Kathy Kelly did a lot of backstage. She did a lot on the WWE digital team and NXT. Last night was her last night. She is leaving WWE. She had a little nice moment after they went off the air with Triple H and Undisputed Era. Brought her some gifts. And apparently, if you go on the Wikipedia page and look up for, Undisputed Era, Kathy Kelly is now listed as a member. So there's that.
She's undisputed. That's awesome.
Yeah, she is. She was pretty good, though. So it'd be interesting to see what's in store for her next. As you mentioned earlier, MVP on a segment with Drew McIntyre. It looks like, although he has done wrestling, he has been hired as a backstage producer for WWE. Whether that means we're going to see more segments with him or he's just going to be involved in a backstage role, MVP is back.
You know what? I think he has a good head for the business.
Absolutely.
He's been around long enough. He worked under the tutelage of a lot of greats. When he was, when he was first coming up, what was it, 2006, 2007? Think about all the guys that he got to work with. He had a series of matches with Benoit, fought Angle, had a lot of great things with Batista, Undertaker, all of them. So he has a lot to give to a lot of the younger talent. well utilized. I think that's a excellent pick by WWE. I think that's really cool and really good for him. I know that he got to have a couple of matches, of course, Royal Rumble, and then the next day he had a match against Rey Mysterio on Monday Night Raw. So, he can still go. Maybe we'll see him do a couple more matches here and there. You never know. Just kind of, on the spot, like you see sometimes when Mark Henry or some of the guys, pop in every now and then. But putting him behind the scenes, good move.
Absolutely. One more thing. During TakeOver last night, NXT announced the next NXT UK TakeOver will be in Dublin.
Which is the first one outside of UK.
That is correct. It actually prompted my family and I to look to see what actually constituted the UK, because we're a bunch of idiots and don't know about anything other than America.
I only knew it because Nigel said it.
Ah, well, there you go.
I was about to look it up, and then he goes, "It's the first one outside of the UK." I go, "Well, don't need to look that one up anymore."
Yeah, right.
So I mean, it was not very big week of news, but some good points that did happen this week. Real quick before we do start talking about a couple of our main topics like we always do want to talk a little bit about this week in pro wrestling history. Not much, but a couple of very big notable points that I remember, and I'm sure every one of you out there remember. This week in pro wrestling history, let's take a look back here. In 1997, Shawn Michaels lost his smile. Where did it go? So that happened. 1 year earlier, Brian Pillman called out saying that he respected the Booker Man, which we know that happened at, I believe it was a Super Brawl, where on live pay-per-view, it was supposed to be a match between him and Kevin Sullivan. The loser is supposed to say, "I respect you," almost as opposed to saying, "I quit." It was an "I quit" match, but "I respect you." Kevin Sullivan, of course, is the booker. Pillman says, I didn't think he even took him a bump. Maybe he did. I can't 100% remember. I'd have to go back and look, but gets on the mic and says, "I respect you, Booker Man." Drops the mic, takes off. Again, no, not everybody really knew that he was the booker. It was a worked shoot back then. It looked more shoot than anything, but it was a worked shoot. Arn Anderson then came out, took his place, and they had a hell of a match, which was really cool that Anderson came out after that. I always like that. But that happened also this week. A couple other things. Eddie Guerrero in 2004 defeated Brock Lesnar at No Way Out, becoming the WWE champion, his one and only world title. You know what's funny? I actually just recently thought a good show that we could do. One-hit wonders. Guys who only held the world championship once. Should they have had more? Just kind of a little something like that. A little something.
Jinder Mahal will not be on that list.
Yeah, no, he's definitely going to get a second run. That's why. We don't need to put him on there. This week in 2011, The Rock returned home. As we all remember, they were saying that we were going to have the host of WrestleMania 27. Who is it going to be? I remember watching, and I remember that entire episode, how they built towards it. One of the coolest things is that they show a person getting out of the limo, and the person's wearing high heels. So you're like, okay, it's probably Stephanie McMahon or someone like that. Lights go out, all the electricity, and bam, The Rock comes back. And it's the first time that he had done anything, really, since I want to say 2004, 2005, really, at that time. So it had been quite some time. It was really good to see him back, and that's what really kicked off the feud eventually between him and Cena. Kind of, a 2 full year program that they ended up having. And another thing that happened this week, one of my favorite things ever to happen on a pay-per-view, was the debut of Paul White, the Big Show. He debuts at the St. Valentine's Day Massacre pay-per-view, where Stone Cold Steve Austin defeated Vince McMahon in a steel cage match. With that match, Big Show comes into the match and throws Austin right through the cage onto the floor, giving Austin that victory, allowing him to take the the spot that Vince McMahon was going to have because he won that he won that 30-man Royal Rumble. He was going to WrestleMania, supposedly. But then, of course, with that win, Austin secures that victory and goes on eventually to face The Rock at WrestleMania. So that's some fun little things that happened this week in pro wrestling history. But now, of course, we talked a little bit about NXT's Takeover earlier, but let's talk what's ahead of tonight's
Wednesday Night Wars!
All right, last week. You know what? Not a whole lot we have to really talk about when it comes to NXT because a lot of it was the take-home show, the go-home show, for Portland. One notable match I want you to talk about. You're the one that told me, hey, you got to check it out, and I did get a chance. It's one of the things I did check out was Adam Cole taking on Kushida.
Yeah, it was almost a throwback to New Japan. Cole almost had his Bullet Club persona out. You could see it coming through a couple times. Kushida, the great outfit referencing Back to the Future, still has that New Japan vibe to it. But it was a very strong style match. Kushida, at first glance, if you didn't really know anything about him, you wouldn't think he was such a striker. But the guy can move. He can, hard hitting. And Cole's got that background too. So seeing those two go back and forth. A couple near falls for Kushida, just to tease you a little bit. You knew he wasn't going to win the title, but still, it was just a great back and forth, and Cole ultimately went over, and then they teased the match for Takeover. So, yeah, if you get a chance, I'm going to add this preemptively to Professor's Match of the Week to watch, just as a recent one to go back and check. It was well worth it. It was a good way to... I almost thought they were going to use it to show he kind of softened up before Takeover. It wasn't necessarily the case, but if you just want a good, fun, strong style, hard-hitting match, go check it out.
I was trying to think about a good episode that I think we need to do, and I think it's going to be something like top 10 wrestlers of today. Adam Cole is just one of the most consistent, if not the most consistent worker right now, especially as a champion. I don't know if we necessarily count NXT as a world championship per se. It's moving over to TV though makes a difference to me. If you're on USA Network and your championship is being defended to me, and you say it's for the NXT, do they say NXT Championship or NXT World Champion?
Good question. I think it's just the NXT Championship.
It is just NXT, yeah. But the guy just has nonstop matches. I mean, ever since the unfortunate plane delay with the whole Saudi Arabia event where NXT got to take over and really just, but from that moment on, it's like Adam Cole has just been nonstop ever since that moment. But yeah, other than that, one thing I will say is when Kushida debuted, he was immediately kind of thrown into a little bit of a brief stint with Walter. I'm having a feeling that heading into TakeOver weekend, maybe Walter will be defending his UK championship against Kushida.
That would be crazy.
Random option. I think it could be it. Because I can't think of anybody right now on the UK roster that I think would be a good world champion contender. I would love to see Tyler Bate again. I'm a very big Tyler Bate fan. I think him and Walter could go again, and I'll be absolutely fine with it. Maybe even Trent Seven. I'm also a big mark for the entire British Strong Style club.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with that. I wouldn't mind seeing Kushida and Walter. But that is exactly really all we have to talk about when it comes to NXT this week because, like I said, it was more of the Portland show. But what's ahead of tonight? We do have a couple of things that are on deck. We are going to have the fallout from everything that did happen at TakeOver Portland. What's going to happen, with Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa? We know that Baylor just came off a very, very decisive win. That 1916 is one of the coolest moves. Almost a suplex and then right into a brain buster type DDT. It's such a beautiful move.
You talked about the package that they played for Dakota Kai and Tegan Knox. I think the one for Baylor Gargano was better because they showed him kicking Gargano in the head, and they were showing all these tweets from people, and then it just went to a black screen, and it showed Finn Balor's tweet, and it said, "I'm back."
You know what? It's really funny you say that because during that exact video package, I wrote something down, and it's in my notes, but it's not on our shared notes here. So, but it's one thing I do remember writing down was, holy shit, this started in October.
Yeah.
Because October was when the Wednesday Night Wars technically began, right? That Baylor heel turn was the same night Dynamite aired for the first time. That was October.
Heel Balor is the best Balor.
And it's been just building and building. And I said to myself, wait, why didn't you do it at War Games? All right, he's out. I get it. All right. But, man, you're not going to do it at Rumble. You're not gonna, like, why are you waiting so long? Oh. And when you got it, you're like, that time flew. All of a sudden, we went from October, and we are in the middle of February, and finally I got it. And you're right, because it was during that video package when I saw that, I go, wow, that was October. And then all the tweets, and then all the, bam, I'm back. I go, wow, I remember all this. Holy shit. And his build of beating all the other guys along the way. Now, finally, Gargano comes back. I almost thought Gargano at the end of the night was going to join Undisputed Era when that whole turn happened. The only person he's really had a feud with would be Adam Cole, and it could be hey, if you can't beat him, join him, or, out of the respect. I thought it would have been a not bad addition if he went in there. But I don't think Undisputed Era is going to break up at any time soon. I think the four of them together are going to stay together. And looking into tonight, we have Roderick Strong taking on Velveteen Dream. My prediction heading into this next Takeover event is I think somewhere tonight this match is going to end in a schmoz of some form. I don't think we're going to get a real winner. Whether Undisputed Era interferes or there's just a chair involved, whatever it could be. I think these guys are going to go back and forth for a couple of weeks, and then it's going to be determined because if you really think about it, Roddy hasn't had a rematch, has he? I know that we don't give out rematches anymore.
Well, main roster anyway, which is bullshit.
Sure. But we also talking about the, with Keith Lee, being the world champion, or the North American champion. Wasn't Velveteen Dream a North American champion? And I don't believe that he really got a rematch, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that. I'm not 100% sure, but my point is I think there's a great case where it could be a triple threat going into Takeover. That's really where I'm going with this, is I think that all three are contenders for that title. Well, obviously Lee is the title holder. He even throw Dijakovic in there, make it a four-way. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing him again. It's sad. I want Lee to lose the title quick enough so that him and Dijakovic could just be a tag team. I think that would be a very awesome, destructive tag team.
Hell yeah.
Seeing them together. They tagged together during War Games as well as Survivor Series, so I thought that was the writing on the wall of them maybe becoming champs together or a tag team together. Maybe down the road, who knows. But that's pretty much all we got for NXT when it comes to tonight. Just wrapping up everything that happened from Portland. Now we're going to start building towards WrestleMania weekend. AEW, last week, going to run down a couple of things that happened here. Paige and Omega, the Elite, kind of. They defeated SCU, retaining their titles. Now, one thing that was very interesting, the Dark Order, they show up after the match. There was a quick little promo before the match, and Christopher Daniels said, I got it. I'm going to go to the back. I got it. And then when Dark Order shows up later on, where was Christopher Daniels? He never showed back up. No one ever questioned it. Is he a part of it? Is he the Exalted One? Couple of odd notes that go along with that. We know that certain terminology that was used by this guy, the Exalted One, like you said, could be Matt Hardy. Now, the day of this recording, Matt Hardy actually has a no-holds-barred match against Randy Orton. Last week he said goodbye on Twitter, but now he's back again. I think he's just going to run out the rest of his contract, which I believe is till March 1st. something like that. But I believe that then he's going to head over to AEW. Will he be a part of Dark Order? Will he not? Who knows? I'm still hoping on Brody Lee, as you and I both agreed, for the Rochester, New York debut there for AEW. But a big comment that happened as Young Bucks are running down the ring. JR says, it's the Bucks of Youth. If that is not a nod at Matt Hardy, I don't know what is, because he's the one that named them that. Kind of like he calls basically everybody, the day of the new, instead of the new day, things like that. He always messed with everybody's names. It was the Bucks of Youth. JR said it, and I don't know. But then there was an exchange on Twitter between Matt Hardy and JR. Did you happen to read that?
No, I was actually referring to a different one because Matt Hardy said goodbye on Twitter, and then Dark Order on Twitter posts a picture of them saying, "You say goodbye, I say hello."
Oh, it's a good Beatles song.
It is.
So I actually, where I was going with that is someone said, Matt, does this mean you're going there or something like that? Because he said the Bucks of Youth. And he wrote something like, JR can mention me anytime, whatever, something like that. And JR said, I hope to work with you very soon down the road one day, buddy, or something like that. I'm not all, verbatim, everything that I'm saying on this, but something to the extent of. So, but at the same point, is JR just fucking with fans too? I mean, everybody's got a Twitter. Everybody knows how to mess with people nowadays. You don't want to give away too much.
It's
Maybe
the new
JR's messing
kayfabe.
with them. It is. It really is. The new kayfabe is just trolling people.
Yep.
God, that sucks. So anyway,
Yeah, I know, right?
I just realized that. I'm like, oh, that really sucks. Two awesome back-to-back promos. Santana has his promo talking about his father living in darkness, being blind, and who unfortunately had just passed away. That was a real promo. That was passionate. Love hearing him talk. Last week, I sat back. I'm not going to lie, everybody. We listen to our shows. We want to make sure we sound good for you, and I had the chance to listen to last week's show, and it sat with me a little bit more. You're absolutely right. Ortiz really is just that crazy bastard, and you got to accept him. He's just that guy that's in the gang that he's the wild card, and you don't know what's going to happen. With Santana, there's no one way about it. There's no two ways about him. He's one way. He's straightforward. He's an ass kicker. I could see him being a mid-card type champion, the way he could talk and carry himself. So you know what? I stand corrected, ODM. You were right last week on that.
There you go. I'll take it when I can. Yeah, it was a great promo. I'm gonna pivot and kind of steal your thunder here and go on to the next promo because I loved it. And I think what made this promo the best, there was two things. You didn't see his face.
Yep.
And he kept coughing.
Oh, there's a third thing. There's a couple other things. Yeah, because of course it's a playoff of the whole skateboard throat.
Yeah.
Now, and you kept hearing like that and him throwing down. Now, here is the other couple of parts I love about the promo. If you didn't catch it, he's mocking Sammy Guevara. During all commercial breaks, things like that, Sammy Guevara uses his cue cards. This is his version. Only it looks like a homeless written out. It's like written out like a homeless cardboard looking thing.
Spent pizza boxes.
Exactly. And then the best one, or the two best ones, is asking him if he'll fight at Revolution, which we called. That's awesome. We've been hoping for that, and I think that's actually going to be a very, very good match.
Oh, it's going to be real good.
Then he draws a picture of Sammy Guevara with all these dots all over his face and says, I got these herpes from kissing Chris Jericho's ass.
Yep.
Boom. Darby Allin, I love it. I've said it, since him versus Cody. Again, I think I said this last week, so I hate to repeat myself, but him versus Cody was a great match, and it made me really like him a lot. Now these promos are just getting better and better. It's funny because I'm a fan of black and white photos. I always have been, and it's funny because both Darby Allin and Pac keep using black and white, and I'm a fan of it. I just think it looks very cool, but also very straight to the point. You don't need a lot of glitter and glam. The Darby Allin one didn't even need to say a word, just kept coughing. Like you said, it was very, it was awesome, awesome promo. And again, didn't even say a word. Speaking of promos, though, the hometown hero, Dustin Rose, beats Sammy Guevara. And I want to talk about a promo. You see guys that grab the mic. You know, I'm going to fast forward real quick. We'll talk about Britt Baker. Okay? Most heat of the night. That girl gets booed harder than anybody. I'm trying to get a little bit more on the bandwagon for it, you know, because you said it's a build. While her promos do sound a little scripted, better. They are getting better, but scripted. Dustin grabs the mic and says, Jake Hager, I don't know what you're waiting for, but I want a piece of your ass. That's all he had to say. I want a piece of your ass. That's it.
It's Dustin Rhodes, man. You know?
That's all you need to say, though, man. Like, that's it. I want to fight. That's it. And after the next commercial break, it was confirmed that at Revolution, these guys are going to get it on. Man, it was passionate. That's all he had to do was just say 15 words in total. I think that's all he really ended up saying. He's like, are you going to keep ducking me or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, he said something about him being Jericho's bitch.
Exactly. But then just saying, I want a piece of your ass. And that's not scripted. That was everything. He just thought, when I grabbed this mic, if I was in a real fight with this guy right now, and this is everything that's real in life, and that's like the things that have happened, you broke my arm. What am I going to say to him? I'm not going to say, I'm going to eviscerate you and blah, blah, blah. Like how, Moxley said he hated saying that stupid shit.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
I want a piece of your ass. I'm going to hurt you. That's it. So I thought that was an awesome promo. Looking forward to that match. I think, well, first, I'd just like to see Jake Hager get back into a wrestling ring. I haven't seen that in a while. So putting him against Dustin, I think that's going to be a really good match. Then, next up, we had Nyla Rose became the new women's champion for AEW. Couple of things I want to say about this. First, I hate that there's so much negative feedback online. It was right away as soon as it happened. Let me just say this. Congrats to Nyla Rose. Congrats to AEW. I think it's an awesome move. My only negative feedback on this. That title was small for Riho to hold. You guys need to get a much bigger championship. That's going to look like just a regular pair of jeans belt for Nyla if she was to put that around her belt. Or around her
think
waist.
the problem is that they let Brandy design it. She's like, oh, that's cute.
It's really cute.
Not like, this isn't going to look like respectable. This is going to look like some designer shit that I overspent.
As soon as she held it up, I go, I've seen that in the mall. Like,
no, it was great, and I think the way that they're finally starting to book Nyla properly. The promo last week where she slammed Rio through the table and she said, "Next week your ass is mine." I was like, "Oh, okay,
yeah,
you can take the title." You know what I mean? It was great.
It's how she should have been booked for a while.
Absolutely, and one of the best parts of listen, I didn't give a crap about Riho, and a lot of Nyla Rose's matches, because haven't been a lot, haven't been great. This match was fantastic. I loved it. I thought this was.
You know why you loved it?
Because
Because she lost the title.
No, not even that. They both did well. It was that whole little guy or little woman against a big woman. But they did a really good job of it. But at one point, Nyla tried to hit Riho with the one-winged angel.
Oh, I know. I thought would have been great. Just obviously a playoff of Omega and all that. And her relationship with him. I can't say it without, and I'm going to give him the credit. I can't hear her name without doing it the way that Jim Cornette does it.
Riho!
Just, you can't do it without being like, Nyla Rose defeated Riho! Put her in a tag team or something. Get her out of TV. I'm fine.
Pretty much.
I actually liked the post Nyla Rose bitching about, where's all my champagne at? Jericho gets that, and what am I getting out of this? I thought that was actually a pretty cool backstage segment. Shows her kind of thug-like. I'm happy that they gave her the championship again.
Hell yeah.
It should have happened a while back. However, all right, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I'll just say this. She got the internet feedback, right, for winning this championship.
Yeah.
Imagine if she was the very first AEW women's champion. I think the feedback would have been double, if not triple.
Yeah.
I think that's probably why they went with Riho to begin with. If
I
I'm not
think they went with
mistaken.
Riho first just because Kenny Omega.
Well, that too. Probably. You know what? That's very true. But I'm on a Nyla Rose bandwagon. I have been since I first saw her in AEW. What was it? Last year's Double or Nothing. I think it was the very first time I saw her. And I'd like to see, like you said, let's keep it going. Now let's get her some more credible wrestling opponents. you can't keep bringing in all these 97-pound girls. And I'm not trying to, mock anybody because those 97-pound girls could kick my ass. But at the same
We got
point,
Chris Statlander, who's big, but I mean, I don't care about her, and I don't really care for the whole alien gimmick. So
Britt Baker. I mean, but she's a heel, so you're going to have her go against Nyla Rose.
Exactly.
You need a very, who I actually wouldn't mind seeing. Brandy Rose. Maybe let's see her as a face try and go after it. Because, wow, I'm really good at just call me the transition king. I'm really good at this. In the next segment, or right before that, or right after this next segment, we end up having MJF defeated Jungle Boy. Brandy Rose is on commentary throughout that entire match. Obviously, it's in prep of everything with Cody versus MJF, and Brandy is 100% face again. So that's one thing I wrote down. I want to make sure we get that out there. That entire, I wanted to say Amazing Kong because I know she's had different words or different names all along the place. But Kong, she's gone for now. From what it seems like, I guess they just dropped the entire Nightmare Collective gimmick.
Talked about that last week a little bit.
Okay, so I'm all right with that. But now she's full face, though, as we could tell from that whole interview, just how she talked. She was very appreciative and very happy about everything. And she wasn't, I actually liked listening to her on commentary. Before that, Jericho says, next week, I'm bringing in a bounty hunter, Jeff Cobb. I'm watching this, and I said, I didn't even know his contract was up with Ring of Honor, but it is. That's right, it had been. I'm like, so that's pretty cool. So let's keep watching, see what happens. And in the main event, Jon Moxley defeats Santana. Good match, very good match. I thought it was Santana's best match, best showing on. Actually, I would put that up there as one of Moxley's best Dynamite matches. He's had a couple of good pay-per-view matches, but Dynamite, this was a very credible match. He had a good one against Darby Allin too, but I think Santana really brought it with him. But as soon as that match is over, Inner Circle, they jump Moxley.
Naturally.
And they bring out the bounty hunter a week early. Because why would you have thought that he was coming out tonight? He said next week, right?
Yep.
He didn't say he wasn't here. He just said next week you're facing Jeff Cobb. He didn't say he wasn't there. Jeff Cobb shows up and takes out Moxley. Well, what was left of him after the Inner Circle beat his ass. So Jeff Cobb is a part of, I want to say, Inner Circle. He's at least the bounty hunter for them, which is kind of funny because I thought, Jake Hager is the big hurt, right? He's the big monster for the crew. But, hey, Inner Circle looks like it is growing a little bit. Jeff Cobb, that's a big guy. I had the chance to watch a lot of his matches in the G1 this year. Some great Ring of Honor matches, New Japan. If you have not checked out Jeff Cobb, get on it, especially before catching some of, hopefully if you can, before catching tonight's Moxley-Jeff Cobb match on Dynamite Live. But what to look forward to tonight with AEW, we do have Moxley and Cobb, but we are going to get another tag team title match as now, is that the third one in a row? Third week in a row, I feel like?
SCU, who was the week before?
Oh, no. They were just part of an 8-man tag. My apologies. But now they are going to be facing the Lucha Brothers. Pentagon and Phoenix are going to be taking on Hangman Page and Kenny Omega. Now, what's funny about this is tonight we're also going to be getting the not 20-man, I don't even know how many teams it is, but however many team Battle Royal to number one contenders. The winners are going to go on to face the tag champs. Where does everything go from here? I do know that they said last week, now that SCU lost, they are actually already thrown into that Battle Royal. Which, I'm like, okay, but are they in there just as bodies? Because I don't need to. We know they're not going to win. And if they do, I don't want to see it. Because even if it's SCU versus Lucha, we've seen it. If it's SCU versus Hangman and Hangman and Omega, we've seen it. So I would really like to just see a brand new set of contenders. I'd like to see Inner Circle. I'd like to see Santana and Ortiz go after those titles. Maybe tonight Omega and Page retain, and that is where they finally lose it, is at Revolution. Maybe we finally get the crack between Omega and Page. My one complaint, I get they're really pushing this on TV. They're doing a good job. But I think I know where. Remember how we're like, oh, you're not showing me enough story to care and understand? I think the Young Bucks and the Elite are spending too much time on being the Elite. A lot of their storyline, you see them apologizing and stuff to Paige, and they're like, hey, come on, let's get over some of this stuff, blah, blah, blah. That's stuff you should be doing on TV to get me invested, not on YouTube.
Exactly. I think their
only complaint.
Yeah, I think their expectation is that people are going to watch that and not thinking about the fact that there might be a very large part of the audience that's not watching that show week to week. So why not just put it? You don't need to do a YouTube show anymore. You have a TV audience. Now, if you want more TV time and you're just that vain where you need to be on screen as much as you can, then you can use the BTE for that. But those storylines, don't, put Easter eggs in there maybe, but you shouldn't be putting vital pieces of the storyline on a YouTube show that a lot of the audience isn't going to watch. I can't say I have time. I try to watch it weekly, but I didn't watch today's.
They even did it with Omega because he was on a losing streak, and a lot of that stuff was on being the Elite. I'm like, why are you not putting this on Dynamite? I need to see this stuff. You need to get the person who's never watched being the Elite, who's turning on TNT for your first time and seeing that. Now, before we move forward, I want to throw a couple quick things out there. First, this is what our Revolution card is looking like, and I'm actually pretty happy with it. We know there's going to be a tag team title match. We don't know who. We don't know. Tentatively right now, it's Paige and Omega defending their titles, but we don't know what's going to happen after tonight. But we know that we are going to be getting Sammy Guevara versus Darby Allin. We are going to be getting Jake Hager versus Dustin. And we are going to be getting Chris Jericho defending his title against Jon Moxley. So we got 4 solid matches so far that are a guarantee. We'll see what else builds out in the rest of this week here and heading into the pay-per-view. What's really funny is I kept saying, yeah, the pay-per-view is February 28th. And then when I read that it was the 29th, I go, are they fucking with us? And I was like, oh, it's a leap year. I only know certain things because of things like that, and I will always remember that the reason I know it was a leap year is because there was a pay-per-view this year. Yep. I have to say, we always like to give our grading who had a better show. AEW, I think they had a better show this week. Only because I think NXT kind of went a little more lax heading into... they had good matches. Nothing wrong with it. But product-wise, show, progression... I think that AEW had a much better show this past week on Wednesday.
Yeah, all I can say is, here's to you, AEW. You won this week.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for...
The best there is, the best there was, and the best that there ever will be. Hold 2, arm bar.
Sodas rule.
Yeah, they do.
Hold 3, the moss-covered, 3-handle family gradunzel.
It's me, Austin!
Just when they think they got the answers, I change the questions.
I did it for The Rock.
This week's top topic.
You know something, Mean Gene? John Cena! Wrestling's not fake!
The Rolex wearing one, diamond ring wearing one, kid stealing, woo, wheeling dealing one, limousine riding one, jet flying one, son of a gun, woo.
Sierra Hotel, India, Echo, Lima, Delta, Shield.
If you smell...
The following ranking order and final decisions are a completely bias-based order, based off the Professor and ODM made it. And as always, they like to let you know they have not worked in the business, but have been lifelong invested fans much like you, our listeners. With not only their opinions involved, but with countless amount of hours of research done each week, they make sure to provide proper facts and history to back it up. However, they do know that your opinion may vary from theirs. If there is anything you want to chat about, bring to their attention. If there is something they missed or forgot, or you just want to let them know they are out of their freaking minds, feel free to shoot them a message on Facebook or Twitter, or email them at thetopofwrestling@gmail.com. As always, they do appreciate all feedback and continued support. At the end of the day, they want to make sure that you do see the best of the best before you die. And now, this week's top topic.
That's right. This week we are back with another installment of this week's top topic. And this one is a goodie. We have top 25 non-world champions in history. Very excited to talk about this one because some of my favorite wrestlers of all time are actually ones that are headlining this list. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how this list came about and where, I guess, some of the ranking is going to lie. Of course, we always hear in our disclaimer that we just played, this is a somewhat biased order, but at the same point, we do try to put in as much fact and information as we can into this. But the truth is, it's hard to rank someone who's never been a world champion where they lie in being a world champion. Last week was easier to say, well, this guy had 10 reigns versus the guy who had 1 reign, or, however long his reign was. So it was a little easier to determine. So we're going to say that, these are our top 25 of guys that we think really should have held that world title at some point. The numbers we're going to take a little bit with a grain of salt. So if it's number 17, you feel he should have been number 12, it's okay. He made the list. But we did have a list of honorable mentions. And right now I am going to fly through some of the list of the honorable mentions. And I know that ODM is chomping at the bit because we have certain ones that we're ready to fight with. When I sent him over the list, his exact text to me was, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Because certain guys that are on this list he's like, I don't think they ever should have been a world champion. But I got a couple arguments as to why they're on this list. Now, again, we're not going to spend too much time on each one of these guys, but we're going to start to, fly through them here. But when we talk about the honorable mentions, I'm going to list all 10 honorable mentions just real quick. I'm just going to name them. You can say what you need to if you think some of them shouldn't be in there, ODM, but I'll be honest with you. Every one of them, because I chose it, they should be there.
Okay.
No, all right. Honorable mentions. We do have Superfly Jimmy Snuka, Andre the Giant, Honky Tonk Man, Haku, Pac, Ryback, Vontavious Porter, MVP, Ken Shamrock, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Ho, and I think a man who most recently in this year, or in the last couple of years, should have been a world champion by now, carrying New Japan, Tama Tonga. I'll just start with him right there. The reason he hasn't made the list fully is because plenty of time left. But I think that all the guys that they've put the title on, I think that promo-wise, he could have carried it better than maybe Jay White could have. I'm not saying anything wrong about Jay White, because him being a world champion and being in that main event picture made me learn about the Switchblade, which is cool. But I think Tama Tonga, his time is due. I'd like to see him be a world champion. His father, Haku, makes that honorable mention list because for his longevity, his real kick-ass style, I mean, behind closed doors, everybody says he's a real son of a bitch. He's a real fighter. I think putting him as a real world champion would have been just as credible as you've seen some of the other guys in the past, like your Bruno Sammartinos, or your Pedro Morales, some of the real big guys. I think he could have very easily been in there. All right, ODM, who do you want to bitch about? Go ahead.
Just to back that up, Haku, Monster Heel Champ, would have been awesome. So I'm down with that one.
Yeah. I think the time that it would have worked, WCW. I think if you would have been great is when you really want to have that Dungeon of Doom, that thing you love so much to talk about.
I was going to say just not have it.
Well, but if you really wanted to make it credible, Ming went after that world title and was a credible opponent. Not Brutus Beefcake in whatever version he was at that point, or the Yeti and all that stupid shit. Ming would have been a better option. I think at no point in WWE was King Haku going to be the champ, but they did let him be the king, which I think is kind of cool. He had a tag team run, but I don't think, or a tag team championship run with Colossal Connection with Andre, but unfortunately, no, not a world champion. Wish he had been. But go ahead, bitch at me. Go ahead.
All right. Ryback and MVP, I just don't care for. That's as simple as that. Ryback just was pretty much the Shield's bitch, as far as I'm concerned, but that's fine. MVP, found out something interesting about him. Do you know who trained MVP?
Oh, you know what? I just move on. I don't know who it is.
Norman
tell me who
Smiley
it is.
From WCW. Remember him?
Oh, absolutely.
So, and another little interesting piece about MVP, he actually beat Kazuchika Okada in a tournament in New Japan Wrestling for the crown the first ever IWGP Intercontinental Championship.
I knew that. Yeah, he's done it. Once leaving WWE, he did a lot of work in other places before even coming back to the States. His first stint back in the States, I believe, was in TNA, and he did a little bit there in a couple of feuds. But really, for the most part, he was kicking some ass in New Japan. Why I say Ryback, I would have rathered Punk drop the title to him when Ryback was really hot, as opposed to him dropping it to The Rock as they did. At one point, you could really make the case that Ryback was extremely over. Listening to the crowd chant, "Feed me more,"
Sure.
I thought was just dubbed in. Later years it was. I thought it was dubbed in. And I went to a couple of different events, and it's real. The crowd was behind Ryback.
Yeah.
He was a big monster, looked a lot like Goldberg. Unfortunately, he got a lot of the Goldberg treatment, people mocking him at first, but then he had a couple of good catchphrases that caught on. His feud with Punk was big.
Yeah, it was.
And then he turned heel, which was, I'm not sure, the best option. I think he really could have been a world champion. Maybe not the WWE world champion, but, he could have been the guy to dethrone Mark Henry. Mark Henry was a world champion up against Randy Orton at one point. He could have been a guy that could have taken it from him. Things like that. I'm just saying that he doesn't have to be the guy carrying the whole company, but I think he could have been a world champion in that time. MVP, as a very credible heel, I think he could. I'm not saying he could have a lengthy reign, but I think he could have at least been tossed a bone to have been a world champion at some point.
Sure. No, I'm cool with that. Now, these next two, I'm definitely going to argue with you on, and one to the point where you kind of saw the writing on the wall and kind of shifted things, but I'm going to start with Honky Tonk Man. Listen, he was a great heel during the time. He was a good person to put in a match, but he was a mid-card guy. Yes, he had the longest reign for an IC champ, but that was all just coincidence. He was only supposed to be a transitional Intercontinental champ, but Jake Roberts failed some drug tests and got suspended. So they just kept the belt on him, and the only reason that they kept the title on him that long is because Hogan went to Vince and vouched for Honky Tonk Man. That's it. That's why he had that long run. Other than that, I don't think there's any reason that dude had to have a world title.
All right. Now, with opponents that you look back at in the day that Honky Tonk was around and Hogan was a champion, he really didn't defend it a whole lot against Honky, and he could have, as opposed to, I don't know, Zeus. Earthquake was okay. He did build Earthquake, and it made Earthquake a credible guy, a very big monster. I'm just saying that I think, had you put that on him, he had enough heat. It would have been a perfect heel. And what if Hogan had dropped it to him instead of dropping it to Warrior in a face versus face? He drops it to Honky. Warrior dethrones Honky. It's just the transitional champion. We've seen it done. I'm just saying he could have been utilized as a world champion at some point.
Okay, well,
fuck you.
All
right, we're already off and running.
You're still wrong with that. You're still wrong. But not as wrong as you are with Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Listen, WWE basically got together and said, listen, we need a cartoon character that we can put against evil foreign heels. What do you got? What about this guy with a 2x4 and an American flag that yells ho? Sold.
Look at, man, I'll be honest with you. I needed to even out the numbers when I came to people who have been a world champion. You know who almost made the championship reign on there was Rick Martel. But he was an AWA world champion, so I had to take him off. Hacksaw was never a world champion. There's really not a whole lot of guys that, when you really look at it in the grand scheme of things. Last week we counted a lot of world championships in different organizations.
Indeed.
So I had to, if I'm going to count it in that version, I have to count it in this version. Hacksaw evened it out at number 10. Now, I will say one person that's on there, Andre the Giant. People are going to go, oh, he was a world champion. Okay, that's why he's in my honorable mention list. He did defeat Hulk Hogan on that Saturday night's main event with the double referee thing. We know that happened, and then he passed the title off to Ted DiBiase. An extreme dusty swerve, or whatever kind of swerve you really want to call it, of all time. Noted as a champion, then it was, handed over and then vacated, whatever you want to call it. So I'm not sure if you really want to consider him an actual world champion or not, but I threw him in the honorable mention because I want you to think about this. Hogan had a couple of straight years as world champion. What if WrestleMania 3, Hogan lost to Andre? It wasn't unexpected at that point. I know personally a very good friend of the show. He told me he stopped watching wrestling after WrestleMania 3 because it was bullshit that Andre didn't win. Man. It could have been very instead of, I mean, history wouldn't have happened that way because then, we wouldn't have had Savage maybe win the championship the next year, things like that, because Hogan probably would have had his return match against Andre the year later. But I'm saying he was the biggest guy, your eighth wonder of the world. He was a big dude. He should have been a world champion, defending it for 2 years straight. He should have been a world champion in WWE. However, he was technically, that's why he's in our honorable mention. If that was not technically counted, he'd be number 1 or number 2. I'd be willing to bet on that for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So now let's get into the real business of why we're here. Let's talk about the top 25. Again, we're going to start to fly through a lot of these, because here's the deal. They've made championships, some of these guys. They've been tag champs. They've been mid-card champs. That's awesome. But why has WWE never pulled a trigger? That's what we're here to debate, is each one of these guys. Why is the trigger, not just WWE, NWA, WCW, whoever, why has the trigger never been pulled for these guys? And I'm going to let you go ahead and start off with number 25. We're talking about, honestly, I thought would have been world champion by now in WWE, at least by now. A couple of years ago, I would have liked to have seen it happen. I thought it was going to happen post-WrestleMania, especially when at WrestleMania 30, when he threw Andre. Wow, I am Hogan. Holy shit. He threw Big Show over the top rope at WrestleMania 30. I'm talking about Cesaro.
Swiss Cyborg. Yeah, this guy, listen, I'd probably have him even higher on the list. He is one of the best pure workers in wrestling today. He doesn't get enough accolades. He never has gotten the push from WWE. He won the one Andre Battle Royale. He's been tag team champs a few times. I believe he was a U.S. champ. But this guy should be main eventing. He can put anybody over. He can work with anybody. I put him in the AJ Styles, Finn Balor category. If you need somebody to run a match, this is your guy. You even go back to, you'll be proud of me with this, go back to Ring of Honor, his matches with El Generico in the title scene. And you even had he had a great match with Sami Zayn in NXT.
He was tag champs with Chris Hero. They were the Kings of Wrestling. I've been a huge fan of Cesaro for a very long time. Yeah, you're absolutely right. All the way back to Ring of Honor. I'm a little bit proud of you. Good job, son.
See? There you go.
I would love to have seen them pull the trigger on him. I think that went out the window pretty much right after that WrestleMania 30 real weird push, because right after that they put him with Paul Heyman. Seemed like that was going to be a helpful thing, and it wasn't. He's just been going back and forth. I love the work with him and Sheamus. I'm not going to lie. The Bar was a great tag team. I kind of wish they would just come back. If you're not going to do anything with either guy single, really good. I mean, right now, what's Sheamus doing? Just beating up Chad Gable every week.
Pretty much.
Or Shorty G. I would have rather them just put them back into a tag team title picture, because that's credible to me. But Cesaro really could have been a world champion. The problem is, one thing I really think stunted everything, and it goes back to one of the very first Stone Cold Network podcasts that he did. And it was post-Raw one time, and he had Vince McMahon on there. And he talked about people who could reach that brass ring, people who could be the guy. And he asked if Cesaro was that guy. And he said Cesaro's not.
That's a damn shame, man. Just
wrong.
Bullshit.
Yeah,
it is
man.
Bullshit.
The guy literally is fluent in, I think 7 languages, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, he could globally go across into any country and be a face or heel. You want him to be a good guy and talk good to the crowd, whatever, bad to the crowd, whatever. He could do it in different languages. He may not be the most credible on the mic, but Jesus, Roman Reigns is like maybe a tenth of what Cesaro is on the mic. Cesaro's just quick to the point, right?
And Cesaro
is a matchmaker.
Yeah, for not being that big, he is a strong dude.
Yeah. He's like Tyler Bate. I mean, Tyler Bate's smaller than him, but a guy that is not supposed to be lifting shit like that, especially with the way he used to do the swing, with guys like Great Khali or Big Show. The guy is a muscular dude. Well, I don't understand why you're not giving him the opportunity to be a world champion. That one really pisses me off. You're right. He probably could be or should be higher, but I'm giving it high hopes because he's still in WWE. He's still got time. He's still in the stages of it. I can't count him out just yet. I'm not sure if there's anything you want to add to Cesaro.
The only thing I think part of the problem is they've just tried to slap so many gimmicks on him instead of just letting him be him. If they would like scale back the need for a gimmick and maybe just give him a mouthpiece, it might.
No, you're right. They moved around too much with him.
And that's why I think he's failing.
Yeah, well, that's the reason a lot of the guys are probably on this is they've been moved around too much. Number 24, the Junkyard Dog. Now, really my main reason as to why I'm putting him on this list is JYD was over. I mean, he came out, the crowd was electrified. Everybody loved Junkyard Dog. Love how he would be on his hands and knees and headbutt you. That was one of my favorite things when I was a kid. I used to love doing that. It could have been progressive or historic for WWE to pull the trigger and make him a world champion. The first real recognized African-American world champion wasn't until, Ron Simmons in WCW when he defeated Vader. WWE could have done that years before with Junkyard Dog. And again, with how over he was, he could have been the face of your company very, very easily.
Oh, yeah.
There's always been these weird claims that, and I'm not going, this is rumor and innuendo, we'll call it claims of what I've just heard. Allegedly, that not WWE's racist, but more of that in the past, they've just looked more, they just didn't look that way. So it wasn't like they were against putting an African-American in the world championship picture. Like they were like, no, it wouldn't be it. They just saw other guys that were more credible. They just happened to be white throughout the time. And then it, gradually changed. Rock, of course, was one of the first ones to really change in WWE. I really think they missed a big window with Junkyard Dog on a global standpoint of making your first African-American champion happen in WWE. I really think they missed that boat. I think he could have been a big transition for your business, bringing in a whole new market so early into the stage of the game. What are your thoughts on that? I know I just probably went more political than you probably expected, but I'm actually curious what your thoughts are.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to speak to conjecture, to rumor, or innuendo.
Don't you fucking use words I don't know.
Junkyard Dog, good. Be on list.
Junkyard Dog, be on list. It's like that text I sent you earlier. You're like, bro, English. So
no, I think you're right. Yeah.
He really, I think it could have been a game changer for the company, for
even a short reign. Even a short reign would have
totally.
It would have revolutionized things, and like you said, he could have been the face.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I like when you tell me I'm right. Number 20. Yeah, well, you're gonna do it a lot in this one, maybe. Number 23, the Iceman, Dean Malenko. Why do I think he is on? Why I think he could have been a world champion? You put him in the same category as Jericho, Benoit, Guerrero. All the same guys, same size, same stature, everything that came over from WCW. So why can't he have been a world champion? He was having just as many great matches as any one of those guys. He was the, I would say, the head of the cruiserweight division because he was the most credible heel for the longest time. Him and Rey Mysterio had a lot of great matches against each other. Then later on, he had ones with Jericho and Hoovy and everybody. So him coming over to WWE, I don't think they ever would have pulled the trigger with him being a world champion. I think if anybody could have pulled the trigger with Dean Malenko being a world champion, it could and should have been done in WCW. And I'm talking about the times of right before Radical's took off and headed over to WWE. When you let Benoit be your champion, right around that time, I think just a little bit around then, it could have been the same thing. Maybe if let's say those guys stayed, Benoit decided to stay and all those guys stayed, then he could have tossed the title around between them. The younger guys, not younger guys, but at least the smaller guys, not your Kevin Nash, Goldberg, Sid Vicious, everything that we were seeing in WCW at that time. I think Malenko could have been a great, again, maybe more of a transitional champion. But the way they were doing things at that time, I would have been absolutely fine if there was a 6-man match, Malenko just happened to win it at that pay-per-view and lost it to the next. The way they were booking shit, that would have made much more sense than David Arquette winning that world championship.
He who shall not be named.
Hey, we went for the hat trick. Don't make me go for 2 hat tricks in the same show.
Yeah,
I'll start it halfway through the show right now. David Arquette, 2. It's like Beetlejuice, bitch. All right. Number 22, we talk about the loose cannon, Brian Pillman. I was first introduced to Brian Pillman very young when he was in WCW, Flying Brian Pillman. Then I got to see a lot of his heel persona. Then he shifted over to ECW and then WWE, where he ended his career a part of the Hart Foundation. I don't think at any time while he was alive, he should have been a world champion. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if he had stayed alive, he could have very easily been a world champion in WWE. Here's why. If he was alive, I really feel this. If he was alive when the whole Montreal screw job had happened, maybe he would have, Bulldog, Neidhart, they took off. Owen stayed back with Brett. Or stayed back, and the whole family took off but him. Pillman wasn't necessarily a family member. If he had stayed, think about him and Austin in that world title picture. What if him versus Austin after he won the title from Michaels, instead of 3 different versions of Mankind that we talked about, right? You had your Mankind, you had your Dude Love, or whatever it was that was happening at that time. And at that point, Pillman really, he was just coming into his own at WWE. I think that it was the most comfortable we were seeing him. He was allowed to do what he wanted to. I mean, Jesus, his last storyline was taking another man's wife and keeping her as a slave for 30 days, basically, Goldust's wife Marlena, and then he died right in the middle of the storyline. I think he could have been a very credible world champion, but unfortunately, I think it would have been at a time where he had already passed. That's just why I think he made the list. I think he really could have been a good world champion. Not at any time when he was alive, though, unfortunately. But he was also a member of Four Horsemen. I always like to throw that in there.
Yes, he was.
That's one of the very first versions I fondly remember of the Four Horsemen, because I remember that shirt coming out, and I was like, the horses on it with the Roman numeral 4, and I go, that's the one I want, and that's the one I got. I love that one. Now, we talk about his feud with Goldust. Now we're going to talk about Goldust. Why don't you talk a little bit about our number 21, Dustin Rhodes?
Yeah, it's great because you got to figure he definitely got his break into the business because of who his father happened to be, just one of the most influential bookers of all time. But, it's funny because he bounced around a lot. Started in WCW, left when his dad left, and then they both went to WWE, and then they both left after that, and it was a lot of back and forth. I think Goldust has had 4 or 5 different reigns in WWE. First appearing as Dustin Runnels. Very short reign where he actually tagged with Dusty Rhodes before leaving back to WCW.
It was Royal Rumble 91, right?
Yeah. And then in WCW, he did have a reign as the television champion and the U.S. champion. And then he came, back on his second run with a lot of people don't remember his first run, but his second one with WWE was the one. It's when Goldust came out. And I think a lot of it for him, because, he had exposure to the main card. I think the part of the problem might have been the Goldust character was too silly for people to take him as a world champion. But when you go back and watch his stuff, he is just a pure worker. I mean, he's got a lot of his dad in him, and but he was still able to make something for himself apart from that, from Goldust. And then there was the godforsaken brief stint as, I can't remember his name in WCW.
The artist formerly known. Oh, you're talking about Seven,
where he did the vignette outside the kid's bedroom window, and they dropped that whole thing. And
the only thing I loved about Seven was his promo when he finally came out in WCW, and he goes, "I left WWF for this shit, and now they got me dressed like this. My name's Seven, by the way. That's what they're calling me." Like I was like, what the fuck is going on right here? I'm like, I've never seen someone just not care at all like that. 5 decades.
Yeah.
When he wrestled Sammy Guevara on the first episode of Dynamite in the beginning of this year, 2020, they made that note that with that match, it was his official first match heading into his 5th decade in wrestling. Now, it doesn't mean he's been wrestling for 50 full decades. He's just been a part of 50 different types of decades. He wrestled in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. No, I'm sorry, the 80s, 90s, 2000s, all of 2010s, and now here we are in the beginning of 2020, and he is now still wrestling. And the guy looks like $1 million. Well, maybe like $9.99. But
yeah.
No, but look at that match with him and Cody. Dude, I mean, that was phenomenal at Double or Nothing. I loved that match.
I still think the Goldust thing plays a big part in it. He could have been a credible champion because he could work. He was strong. He never, next to Goldust, he was never really given a lot of mic time. And it's unfortunate because, like you mentioned earlier, he's just one of those real guys and doesn't really have to stretch too much to cut a promo, or a good promo for that.
I'm just thinking of this here. Cody can't take the title.
Well, I've got a theory on that too.
Hang on. Well, I'm sure it'll be a stipulation at some point that he gets put back in the picture, I'm sure. But Moxley's not taking the title. Only one credible opponent I really think will take the title from Jericho would be Omega, because we need a face. Man, what if...
Yeah.
Dustin, one last ride. Could you imagine that pop if he was the one to dethrone Chris Jericho? Because then he could bring in a new heel champion like Pac right away. That's my theory. What's your theory? I'm kind of curious now that we're saying that.
I'm done because I think that one's pretty good. No, I was going to say, I think the thing with Cody is it's going to be something that when he signed the contract with Jericho, the stipulation was he wouldn't give himself another title match while Jericho was the champ. That's going to be some weaseled thing in the contract. But I don't think Cody would do that. That's not a Cody move. So,
well, because wrestling.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, it's not WCW booking, although it seems like it is sometimes on AEW. But anyway.
Well, coming in at number 20, this one I had a very strong belief behind, because he's just been another man that's been a part of the business for a very long time in a couple of different ways. He was first a part of the Varsity Club. He was Mr. IRS, Erwin R. Shyster. We also saw him tagging in that role with Ted DiBiase as the Money Inc. Tag Team Champions. We see him go on and become VK Wall Street, which was a nice little kick at Vince McMahon back in the day in WCW. I'm talking about the father of the Rotunda Boys, which also known as Bray Wyatt and Bo Dallas. We're talking about Mike Rotunda. I think he's just a great in-ring talent. He was reliable. Not 100% sure what gimmick of his would have been the one to carry a world championship reign. But I think you made him go out there and become a fucking tax guy where he came out yelling at people and he did it with a straight face. Give him any gimmick, I think he could have rocked as a heel world champion, pissing off the crowd. The crowd booed him. I never heard a cheer ever. Ever. I think he could have been a really, really good heel champion, but go back and watch some of his early stuff. Again, the Varsity Club stuff. I mean, he is a great Olympic mat type style wrestler, and you see a lot of his wrestling in his boys, much like you said how you see Dusty in Dustin or Cody. You see, the lineage going down the line with the family. Same thing I really feel like with Rotunda. I'm not sure. Do you agree? Is this one of the guys you disagree with me on? That
yeah,
shouldn't
it's
be
a
on the
tough
list?
one, man, because I got nothing but respect for him. But the problem is that it's almost like he was born too late to benefit from the type of champ we'd expect in the 70s. And he was born too early to, you know what I mean? He was just born he was in a weird time. And
you're right. I think actually if he came into WWE, let's say maybe about 2 years before, he could have been another credible heel at the same time when you had Rude, Perfect, and all those guys. He could have been a good guy to fight against Hogan, actually. Maybe not in the Erwin R. Shyster mode, but something to the effect of. I think you're right. Maybe if he came in just a touch earlier, he could have been a very credible world champ foe against Hulk Hogan.
he was at a time where he needed a gimmick, and there was never a gimmick to make him seem credible. Because who would see IRS as a credible world champion? Or Wall Street as a credible world champion.
Right.
It was too late for that. Again, if he in the 70s, he could have just been a straight up wrestler, and he definitely would have had enough natural heelish qualities and enough skill in the ring to be seen as a credible threat. Other than that, though, I mean, his tenure in WCW and WWF at that time with the gimmicks, I don't disagree that he could take on any gimmick and make it work, or at least get the most out of it. But I just don't think that he had anything that you could have put him as the face of the company.
You know what I always find funny is he's my go-to guy I would actually think about when he's in the locker room in 91, 92, 93. Guys are coming in. Your gimmick is Duke the Dumpster Drosy. You're Bastion Booger. You are Mantar. Do you think he just went, I'm a fucking tax man? Yeah. Because you're like, I am not any of that stuff.
Exactly.
And you always hear on Something to Wrestle, you always hear them talk about the box of gimmicks. They had to have gone in and gotten some of these because, you have real life jobs, plumbers, this, that, hockey, the goon, you know what I mean?
The goon. Yeah.
Thank God. All I got to do is wear a shirt and tie and wrestle in that. Yeah, sure. Sold. Because the next guy up was the garbage guy. It's
Yep.
Could have been worse for IRS, but at the same point, the guy played ball. He was whatever you were going to make him. He made good money there. He made a life out of it. And look what his boys are doing. They're both in the same exact company that he was probably his height of his popularity, I would at least say. Well known in both stints in WCW, but I'd say most people, if you saw a picture of him, people are going to go, IRS. I would at least. That's personally
Absolutely.
me and a lot of people
I'm with
I
you
know.
on that one.
Number 19 is El Matador, Tito Santana. Arriba! I loved Tito Santana. I thought he was an excellent, good guy face worker. We talk about could he have been the face of the company? Really hard to tell when you have a guy like Hulk Hogan in that era, but you have to really think about, let's just say let's say Hulk Hogan never existed. That's how a lot of these guys are going to make that list because, who's really going to be the credible guy up against him or another face guy. Santana could have been very easily just like another Pedro Morales, Bob Backlund.
Agreed.
The fighting champion, the good guy fighting champion. And when him and Martel split, think about that. No Hogan, right? Him and Martel split. You could have had a great world title feud right there between the both of them. He could have elevated guys like Shawn Michaels, and he did. Think about WrestleMania 8. They did fight each other. Tito Santana was a lifer in WWE. And I had the privilege of meeting him, and one of the nicest human beings. He's a freaking school teacher now, which is so crazy. I'm like, could you imagine growing up in school and you're like, someone tells you that and you go back and watch him just doing all that high-flying stuff. He was the innovator of a lot of those body presses that you were seeing back in the day. And he was a very fast-paced wrestler for his size. I was a very, very big fan of Tito Santana. I think he could have been a world champion if no Hulk Hogan. Again, that's how a lot of these guys are going to happen to make this list.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that one. He had that charisma and he didn't have a gimmick. You know, he was just Tito Santana. He was great in the ring. He was fast-paced, which made you excited to watch him work. And you know, I can't even necessarily say he had a lot of personality, but, you know, it was definitely somebody you wanted to root for, and it was somebody that got you jacked up. So, I know, I definitely, and like you said, splitting with Martel, that would have been a great feud.
Oh, yeah. Especially the whole Strike Force. Yeah, yeah. Now, number 18. We have the Beast from the East, Bam Bam Bigelow. Okay, again, this is, take people out, insert them, things like that. Take out King Kong Bundy. Let's say he never existed. Man, putting him in at WrestleMania 2 in a cage match against Hulk Hogan. They were partners on the same tag team in Survivor Series in '87. I think that they very well could have been a great set of opponents against each other with Hogan and Bam Bam. I think he very easily could have been a world champion. He had that just nasty beast look. I mean, he had the tattooed skull or tattooed head. He was that bad guy part. And I mean, dude, well, first, before I talk about his biggest debt to society ever, we're going to back up a little bit. 93, he was in the King of the Ring finals against Bret Hart. And around that time, right after Bret becomes world champion, I think very easily he could have been a great opponent for Bret. They had Bret versus Razor Ramon at Royal Rumble 93. 93. Bam Bam very easily could have been in that place. And very easily could have dethroned him. Take out Yokozuna, Bam Bam at WrestleMania 9 could have been a very, very credible opponent for Bret Hart as well. He should have been given a world title at some point in his life for the bullshit that he had to do at WrestleMania 11 by putting over Lawrence Taylor. Yeah, that's right, LT. He put over number 56 of the New York Giants on the biggest stage of them all in the main event of WrestleMania. Hey, Bam Bam main evented WrestleMania. Let's put it that way. One of my favorite things about him, though, was on the way out to the ring. LT already comes out to the ring to Salt and Peppa singing "What a Man" because it's pretty popular at that time, and they're talking about LT. Bam Bam comes out and just charges right at them and scares the shit out of them as they're on the stage. I was like, yes, awesome moment. I mean, again, that was main event, kind of world title-ish kind of thing. Fucking Punk, he's been a world champion, and all he ever wanted was just a main event WrestleMania. Bigelow did it. I think Bigelow really could have been a great world champion. You put him in, they put him in, his later years in WWE with the Money Inc., and he was kind of the muscle for DiBiase's crew. When Kevin Nash took over as a champion, had Bigelow not taken off and went over to ECW and WCW, maybe he could have been a champion right there. But also, even in ECW, he could have been a world champion contending against guys like RVD, Sabu, Rob Van Dam, or I'm sorry, not Rob Van Taz. There was a lot of great opponents that he could have had world title matches with, and he wasn't a world champion. So I think Bigelow, really one of the best heels, one of the best fast-paced big men. I mean, we're talking about Keith Lee. That's the original right there. You said Vader. That's one of the other guys that I would say that he kind of reminds me of.
And did a moonsault, too.
Yeah, definitely could. And a good one at that. Go ahead and talk about number 17.
Number 17.
Usually comes after 18, bro.
Well, if you just keep with one list and stop changing it every 5 minutes, maybe I'd have something to say. So
you just got to be ready by game time, man. Just be ready by game time. The notes were ready by game time. But look what happened to me at game time. I read fucking results. So that's what happens.
Well, you're changing the rules as you go, so that's good. British Bulldog. Listen, man, this guy was over since his first run with the WWF as part of the British Bulldogs tag team. Came back. They put this guy was so over, they decided to hold a SummerSlam in England just to capitalize on how over he was, okay? And we're not talking the Jinder Mahal thing where, oh, we're trying to push India, so even though he's actually Canadian, or what they're doing with Drew McIntyre now, because a lot of it is motivated because they're trying to get that British market through their new TV deal. Not that he doesn't deserve it, but British Bulldog easily could have been a champ, and I think it's just another one of those victims of circumstance. He was always in the main card with Diesel, with Michaels, with Brett, with Owen. He was the first European champ. It was just bad timing, and after, like you said, with the whole screw drop, he left. He ended up coming back. Unfortunately, he had a heart attack at a young age, and he was training to come back again. Who knows if he would have been able to pull it off. His last run, he ditched the Union Jack tights and just went into jeans and was just a straight badass. And
yeah, I wasn't really a fan. I could have done without his last run. If he had left with Heart Foundation and went over to WCW as he did and never came back to WWE, I'd have been fine with it. I wasn't really a fan of his entire run when he was wearing jeans. It was nothing to do with the jeans. It was just his entire run. He was done. He, from everything I read, he was already popped out on pills.
Yeah,
he was popping just to get along in each match. One of my favorite matches of him in a world title match was him versus Bret Hart at In Your House, December of '95. Fucking bloodbath, and very credible opponent for him. I mean, if he beat him at SummerSlam '92, why couldn't he just beat him 3 years later for the world title? So, I think that in his heyday, absolutely he could have been a world champion, whether heel or face. Because when he went heel, that was a big shock to everybody when he turned and man, I mean, I actually wanted him to be the one to dethrone Diesel, Kevin Nash. I mean, that's who he was a part of that run. It would have been perfectly fine. And he also made Shawn Michaels look like $1 million in the world title feud with them in '96. And you remember they had a couple of different ones with Beware of Dog. They fought at King of the Ring. He had a couple of great matches with Shawn Michaels, making him look good. So, definitely he was in the world title picture, very easily could have held that world championship. Number 16, just one of the biggest heels of all time. I think that if you had ever put the strap on this guy, it would have been the same as when Iron Sheik had that championship. We're talking about Nikita Koloff. And I'm not talking just because it's just another foreigner. I'm talking about, well, maybe I am talking about a foreigner, because back then, your 70s and 80s, everything was America versus anybody. And if you came in and you were any form of a foreigner, you were booed. Minus, if you were a... like your Pedro Morales, not necessarily. We're talking about the guys that came in anti-America. Nikita Koloff basically being like that. I think if you had ever put the strap on him, whoever dethroned him, that would have been one of the biggest pops of all time. Absolutely. I think it would have been a very huge one. Around the same kind of the era, I'm just going to shift right into it, is our number 15 guy is Chief Jay Strongbow. I was introduced to Strongbow late in life, and it was through the era of Tatanka, because he was the one that was training Tatanka, and they showed a lot of vignettes about him. So I didn't know who he was, but then when I went back, he's a Hall of Famer and a very, very over talent. You're talking about what Pedro Morales was to Puerto Rico, Chief Jay Strongbow was to the Indian community, if you will, for the Native American community who really wanted to see a world champion in him, and he was their savior. They wanted him to be a champion. He was over very easily. Again, could have been a guy that held the championship. There's so many circumstances when you look at a lot of these, and you got to say, what if the guy who was there in that time didn't exist? We look at Cesaro and we say, why? Why not? But we look at Tito Santana and we go, well, we know why. Fucking Hogan. It was not going to happen at that time. Certain guys, we can make that argument. Certain guys like Strongbow, he just wasn't as over. But I think if he had been given a world title shot, or been a chance to actually be the world champion, I think he could have very easily carried the company just as well as anybody else at that time, especially when the era of Bruno Sammartino, your Pedro Moraleses, all those guys. Number 14. The biggest one, I think, in the last... Well, what year would that have been? Well, about 10-ish years. Yeah, 10 years. The biggest flop, I really feel like, of a man that did not get the title put on him. A lot of people know him as Bad News Barrett. Hate that name. I'm going to go with his name that he had in Nexus. We're talking about Wade Barrett. Stu Bennett, as everybody knows him now, is he does commentary. He's also working a lot with NWA. He did a lot with Defiant Wrestling. Wade Barrett ended up walking away from WWE shortly after WrestleMania 32 because he said, fuck it. I, at one point, was your best heel. People were loving to boo me. The whole Nexus angle we've talked about, it was a huge, huge angle. When we talked about our top 50 stables, the Nexus stable, had it been done right, you could have carried that thing all the way into WrestleMania very easily.
Huge.
You cut it, but you cut that thing within a 3-4 month period at best. Then even after that, into November and December of that year in 2010, Wade was still vying for a chance to actually become a champion. And if he had beat Randy Orton, Cena would be set free. But if not, Cena would be fired and all this stupid shit. I'm like, just put the world title on him. Why are we not doing it? It was also the same time that The Miz was Money in the Bank, or had the Money in the Bank contract, so he was going to be cashing in. You had two guys going around the same time. Was it too much all at once and you just weren't ready? I don't know, but all I can say is Wade Barrett was the man you should have put that world title on, especially when he was the leader of Nexus. What other takeover could you have had? You know what I mean? Like they said, we're here to take over. They ripped up the ring. They beat up everybody. They choked the living shit out of everybody. How do you not put the world title on him at all? Even within that year, yeah.
Because John Cena.
Oh man, it bothers me. It really does because
that's why. That's the answer.
And
Hogan,
I hate
Hogan.
last
20
week,
years later.
I know, but I said last week, fuck the shovel. I think that he's done a really good job in putting people over. That's one of the ones I don't think. The fact that everybody on the SummerSlam team was gone but Cena, and then he beat pretty much the entire team after that of the Nexus.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I remember being in a bar with my wife watching it. Hey, he's going to do it. 3, 2. God damn it, we're down to 1. Let's start grabbing our stuff. Let's just get ready to go. This is over. I already know where this is going because you knew it. You were like, he's not going to win. I really think they missed the ball on Wade Barrett. He could have been a really, really good world champ. Now we talk about number 13. Unlucky number 13. I had to put a tie there. It's funny because I say this is our top 25. Maybe it's our top 26, but we had to put a tie. I really couldn't debate which guy I really felt really could have been a better world champion, but they both wanted. I wanted them both to be on the list. And I'm talking about guys that were actually a tag team together and in the stable of a lifetime, the Four Horsemen. We're talking about the Brainbusters. We're talking about Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. Arn Anderson is he's the mind for the game. He is, one of the most talented in-ring performers, as well as a guy that can teach you so many things in the background. People who say they learn from the enforcer, Arn Anderson, that he's a big help to them. I think if at any point, if you wanted to have him versus Ric Flair for that world title, you very easily could have done it if you broke up the Horsemen that way and had them feuding for the world title. And he very easily could have taken that title, just like any of the other guys that Flair dropped that title to.
Absolutely.
At the same time, we have Tully Blanchard on this list because, as you remember, one of his biggest opponents was Magnum TA. They had a big feud. He feuded with Dusty Rhodes. He really could have been a very big world champion as well. Tully, I don't know why. This is one I actually say I don't know why they didn't pull the trigger. He was such a cocky shit. I think that he could have been the Randy Orton to the Triple H with Ric Flair and Tully. If he had split off from that group and went after Ric Flair and the Four Horsemen, it would have been the same way that Orton took off and went after Evolution. I really think that Tully could have had a really good chance at being a world champion against Ric Flair. They could have had an awesome feud, but just never happened. Why do you think Tully was never given the chance, or Arn? Or do you think they just didn't need it?
God. I mean, I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that they were always in a tag team together in the Four Horsemen. And I mean, you were with Flair, so
yeah, but that kind of goes out the window, though. Tully was a U.S. champion. Arn was a television champion. I mean, they both had singles runs.
Listen, I honestly I don't know. That's a question for the ages, I suppose. But I definitely agree that that belong on the list. I'm more familiar. I was always more of an Arn Anderson fan, so I'm definitely gravitating more towards him. If you had to have a tiebreaker, I would go with him. Like you said, that feud with Flair that could have been would have been built in, and it wouldn't have been a stretch to put the strap on him even for a little bit. So,
I love that he's never had to raise his voice. He talks like this, and you listen.
Yeah,
and that can be his whole promo, and you're like, wow, like, but it's all you need, Dave. He doesn't have to scream. I love that. I think that's awesome about Arn Anderson. The guy he's great on the mic, great in the ring. Like I said, just great psychological wrestler for the game. He knows everything. All the guys look to him. Now we get into some of my favorites now, but we're going to talk about number 12. I'm going to let you talk about number 12. This man, he main evented WrestleMania 1. Go ahead, talk about him.
Sure did. He actually beat Tony Atlas at an event that was the kind of motivating factor behind the first WrestleMania. It's Paul Orndorff, Mr. Wonderful. Just another guy that he was born during the he was wrestling at the right time to just be a really no gimmick needed guy who just, if you looked at a picture of him, you'd be like, yep, that's the world champ, right? That's got to be the world champ right there. But unfortunately, he suffered and benefited from Hogan at the same time. He, within a month of coming to WWF, was thrust into the main event with Hogan. And they did everything. They tagged together at times, and they also had a big rivalry. But it was Hogan, so Orndorff never went over. It got to a point where Orndorff had gotten injured in a match. He hurt his arm and he needed surgery, but he was in the middle of one of his runs with Hogan and didn't want to give that spot up, so he kept wrestling to the point where he was forced to have surgery and actually step away for some time. To the point where he actually owned a bowling alley. So while he was recovering, he was taking care of his bowling alley, and stories had come out locally that he had died. And he actually didn't, and had to tell everybody that he wasn't dead. After that, he started working out, regained his physique, went to WCW, but by that time, the ship had sailed. It was too late. He was an aging old wrestler from a bygone era. So, like I said, Hogan helped put him in the spotlight, and he was in the spotlight. But never gonna put him over, brother.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. We're talking about guys that had Hogan not existed. Here's another one for you. Greg the Hammer Valentine. Here's a little interesting note for you. He technically won the world championship, but it was a dusty finish with Bob Backlund, and the title was just granted right back to Bob Backlund that night, and it just never happened. Kind of like when Chris Jericho beat Triple H on Raw, and that just went back and like it never ever happened in 2000.
I still have a sore spot for that one.
Everybody does. It was one of the best pops ever, and then you just reverse the decision. I'm like, it's so tainted. Same kind of thing with Greg Valentine, but he had great matches with everybody. I mean, in his early years with the Intercontinental title feud with Tito, things like that. But then even in his later years as a tag team specialist with Beefcake or even Honky Tonk Man. So honestly, I think he could have been a great world champion, or at least a world title contender a little more than he was. I think he was underutilized, and he was a great talent. People loved to boo him. He just had that look, especially when you have Jimmy Hart running the mouth on the microphone or on the megaphone, and you're just going in there and doing your thing. I love that he was paired up with him, and especially in his later years. I really think that he could have been a good world champion. He's a good wrestler. I'm not sure if you disagree with me on that, but I had to make sure the Hammer made the list. But this one here, I know that you're itching to tell me apparently that I'm wrong. Coming in at number 10, we have the Governor, the Body, the Mind, whatever he is, the poet, the author, used to be the former ring announcer, whatever he is, the man, Jesse the Body Ventura.
Yeah, and listen, disclaimer, this has nothing to do with his political opinions. I could give a shit. I really don't care.
No, this is always wrestling opinion based. We could talk about the good of Donald Trump on this because he was in WWE. We'll talk about that good stuff. We're not talking anything political, guys.
So, I just don't get it, man. Listen, again, you look at a picture of him and you're like, that guy's an asshole. I don't know.
I do that every time I see a picture of you.
Yeah, I was waiting for that one. You went a little slow with the delivery. I was about to cut you off there. I just don't get it. Listen, he was a great announcer. Like you mentioned it earlier, he had a great rapport with Vince McMahon. They had great back and forth. He did a lot of tag team wrestling. I'd say he did more tag team wrestling than he did singles reign or singles matches. And I just never got it. I don't think he really ever got much in a lot of what he did was with Hogan, and even then it was a lot of tag team based stuff. He never really
because they were building with him. You got to remember, his career was cut short.
It was. You're absolutely right. It was.
And
cut
I
short,
think he had the opportunity. You know, he could have been the Hulkamania. Had he not been injured, he could have been Hulkamania.
Sure.
You know, they were coming up around the same time, around that same era right there. You're saying he was tagging with him. Could have very easily been Ventura.
Listen, I think maybe you and I are approaching this different. You're maybe looking at what it could have been. I'm looking at what was, and with what was, I just don't see him being that. Yeah, there's potential. A lot of people have potential, but some do more with it, some do less with it. Yes, it sucks. He had what did force him to retire early?
I thought it was heart condition.
Okay.
I could be wrong.
I thought I wrote down in my notes. Sorry, everybody. But yeah,
we sound so professional right now.
Yeah, I know. Bro.
Yeah,
man,
I did like the. Speaking of that, I did like the little jumping fish, letting you know how much fish could Bobby Fish fry.
I hated that. I thought that was stupid, but anyway.
Well, talk to us about number 9. You know, we're going to talk more of a positive one. I know that this is one that definitely you and I agree upon heavily. Maybe he should have been higher, maybe he should have been lower, but let's talk about him.
Definitely higher in my mind. Jake the Snake Roberts was not what you would consider a physically fit guy. He wasn't even the greatest worker. But man, that psychology he had in his promos and in the ring, even without the Snake, even without Damien, the psychology, he is a guy I could see holding that title and just nobody wanting to go near him. He could manipulate you. He could just... That's what his, if you want to call it a gimmick, I don't think it was much of a gimmick. It's just, we talked about Paul Orndorff and Jesse Ventura with the injuries. Jake Roberts' big thing was the drug abuse. There was, pills and booze and other drugs, and it just really broke his career. Luckily, he lasted long enough to put Stone Cold over. But even if you go back and watch that match, you can kind of start to see him losing that work rate. Because, again, not to take anything away from him as a worker. I'm not saying he was a bad worker. It's just not what he was known for. He wasn't Bret Hart in that arena.
I'm with you on that. Yes.
But he could still go.
I don't disagree with you. I think if there's ever a time he could have been a world champion, would have been perfectly right after he turned heel. All that stuff with him and Macho when the Cobra was biting him, and then in '92 when Hogan was taken off. I know Flair and Savage had their title feud, right? But after Savage won the title, Roberts lost to Undertaker pretty quickly and was gone. He went over to WCW. Had he stayed, he could have been a great contender for Savage's world title. When he went to WCW, he should have been pushed right into that world title picture because he was a big name coming over from WWF at the time. He really should have been pushed into that world title picture. The way he talks, the way his in-ring psychology was, I think he could have been very easily one of the best world champions, and unfortunately never was. I just recently watched a promo, very simple, and I loved it. It was WrestleMania 7, his blindfold match with Martel.
Oh, when he got sprayed in the eye, yeah.
Yeah, all that whole promo package that leads up to it. And my favorite interview with him is, I think it was Sean Mooney. He's like, "What do you expect, for this match or whatever?" and he said, "A man has 5 senses. A snake, he has 6." And he goes, "We always see better in the dark." That's it. That's all you had to do. And I was like, "Oh, I gotta watch this match now." It's like Arn Anderson, man. The guy whispered. He didn't need to scream, And the later years, he did help out in putting over Stone Cold. That was great. I got to say, everything I saw from him later in the years with the Heroes of Wrestling and all that shit, it scared me because I was like, we're about to lose one of my childhood favorites. But I got to say, man, thank God the DDP and the accountability crib, everything he did. If you've seen the resurrection of Jake the Snake Roberts, it was on Netflix a while back. Very, very fantastic. I'm so glad that he is alive, him and Scott Hall. Yep. And like, if I ever had the opportunity to just literally walk by DDP, I wouldn't even say, "Hey, thanks for your contribution to wrestling. Thank you very much for saving 2 human beings," man. The way that those 2 guys are, and from what you saw in some videos that you could watch online, you're like, when you saw Scott Hall, you're like, he's an hour away from dying.
Yeah, right. You mentioned the Heroes of Wrestling. Not only for Jake the Snake, because you don't really want to focus on the negatives of somebody's career, but just for the entire shit show that Heroes of Wrestling was.
Oh my God, the whole thing.
Go watch it. It is a mess.
Yoko, Jim Neidhart is on there.
Tully fought. Didn't Tully have a match there?
I think so.
And it was the only good match, but they botched the ending.
Yeah. That's a really bad pay-per-view.
It was horrible.
The whole Jake being drunk in the back, doing his interview, coming out, using his snake like it was his dick hanging out of his pants. I was like, this guy is really gone. And I remember watching it. That was 99. I remember convincing my parents to let me get this pay-per-view. They were going away, and they're like, well, it's not a WWF one. I'm like, nah, but it's all the guys I grew up on. This should be really good. And I remember, like, match 2, I was like, I regret doing this because I have to do so many chores for this, and it sucks. I remember just being like, I should not have ordered this one. But, we're getting into our final 8. Some of these we're going to blow through a little faster because they all kind of have the same story. Yeah. Maybe some of them just didn't need it. That's where a lot of these guys are in the end. A couple of them you can really make the case of they should have been holding that strap. One guy I don't think that needed that world title, but I think he could have been a great world champion, especially post that whole WrestleMania 4 thing, is the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. Awesome heel. The crowd loved to boo him. I mean, all the little things he used to do with, hey, you bounce this basketball 10 times and you'll get $100. Oops, kick the ball at number 8. The guy was just a perfect heel. He really should have been a world champion, in the same time rivaling with Hogan and things like that. Again, take Hogan out of that picture, you could have had him and Savage carrying every one of those pay-per-views or house shows, anything, Saturday Night Main Event. They could have had a lot of great matches with each other. I thought their WrestleMania 4 match was really good. They had matches before that were even better. So, again, you take Hogan out of the picture, I really think DiBiase could have been a great heel champion throughout that entire WrestleMania 4, 5, 6-ish era. He stopped early, unfortunately, wrestling. In 93, he retired in his last match against Razor Ramon at SummerSlam 93. We'd see him hang around in WWE to be a manager with Money Incorporated, things like that. Then we see him shift over to being a manager of the NWO, Steiner Brothers as well for a little bit. But for the most part, his later years were managerial role. But in the 80s and early 90s, he could have been a great world champion. Heel, the guy was never a face. The only reason he was ever a face is people just loved to cheer him because he was that much of an asshole.
Absolutely.
Number 7. This one, I still fight to this date. I still think that at SummerSlam 94, Owen Hart should have officially ended the title reign of Bret Hart. He could have very easily passed that title back over to Bret at Survivor Series. Owen should have been the world champion. Bret, I'm sure, probably said a billion times, give him the strap, give him the strap. I mean, especially for it being his little brother. He was the one pushing for that feud to begin with. When they had that feud, I mean, did you not think Owen could have been a world champion at that time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Extremely credible. Of course, then we have the whole Yoko was still in there at that time, and then Bob Backlund, for some weird reason, was the Survivor Series defense. I'd never understand that. That could have been the same thing. Maybe in that night, Neidhart threw the towel in and helped Owen win the championship instead of Bob Backlund. And then losing the title to Diesel would have been fine, just something. I think Owen really very easily should have been a world champion. Another time he could have been a champion was when he was the Black Heart, the last man standing after the Montreal Screwjob. Could you imagine if he had dethroned Shawn Michaels, even if just for one fucking night? That place would have went nuts. Could you imagine that Raw episode? You know when they should have done it? The same night that WCW said, and tonight we're having Bret Hart live, when they announced him to be the special guest referee in the Eric Bischoff, Larry Zbyszko match. Why would, man, let his brother win the championship that match. That night. I'm saying that he could have been a world champion in multiple different times. As a heel, he was a cocky little shit. Everybody loved to hate him. I think he could have been a very great world heel champion in the 94 era, 95, especially in the era where, think about 95, when Diesel was the world champion, he was facing guys like Mabel, Sid a couple of times. A lot of, they had to have those credible big guys, right? But why didn't you give Owen a shot? I know he was your tag team champion at the time, but he really could have had great matches and made Nash look amazing. That's just my personal opinion. I loved him. And everybody always talks about how much of a ribber he was. I think that's such a cool... I wish I had the chance to meet Owen Hart. Seems like, the kind of wrestler you want to meet. He's one guy on camera and a completely different guy off camera.
More homework for the listeners. Go read some Owen Hart stories with backstage pranks.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He's the biggest prankster of them all. Number 6. This guy, the reason he's going to make this list is he could and should have been a world champion. As a matter of fact, I think he was slated to be a world champion, but ultimately, just with his untimely death, Magnum TA, unfortunately, never world champion. Have you ever had the chance to watch him and Tully? They have a great I Quit match. Magnum TA was very, very over. He was in WCW as popular as Sting at the time. And I think that Magnum, he could have rivaled up against Flair easily to be a world champion as well. Very credible opponent. He's very over. Just unfortunately, his time cut short. If you haven't had the opportunity to watch a lot of Magnum TA matches, especially if you are a little bit newer, check it out on the network. Just type his name in, and I promise you, him versus Tully will be one of the best matches that you'll watch, probably out of WCW almost of all time. I really say that. That's one of my favorite matches, him and Magnum TA and Tully Blanchard, an I Quit match. Coming at number 5. This one, I firmly believe, is a man that has been in the business a very long time. In numbers of ways, he could have been a champion any time from probably about 1998 all the way up till about 2008. I'm talking about William Regal, the real man's man. Steven Regal, Steve Regal, Bill Regal, whatever you ever known him as, because he's had a couple of different name changes. In WCW, you could have put a world championship match, or put him in a world championship match, no problem. He is an excellent ring worker. In WWE, I think they missed the ball. I really think he should have been a world champion. That cocky heel like we talk about, but this guy is a mat technician, and he knows how to work a crowd. Unfortunately, they put him in the GM role in the mid-2000s, and he had some matches against Edge, things like that. He was an Intercontinental Champion, things like that. But when he when he was in that King of the Ring tournament, things like that, and I believe he was the King of the Ring winner, he was showing at even a later age he could still go. And at that exact era, I wanted them to pull the trigger. So that's why he makes a list. I think William Regal should have been a world champion in around the 2008 era. It could have been the perfect time to just do it and say, the veteran finally had his chance. But now, he's been here. He's got it. It took him that long. Who's going to take it away from him? He could have been the JBL, honestly. I think if you imagine him being on SmackDown that entire time, William Regal could have very easily have done every one of those matches, every one of those opponents, and better. Nothing against JBL. I'm just saying Regal could have very easily had done that no problem. So very big William Regal fan. I'm letting you go with number 4 because I know this is one of your boys. It's I'll just let me ask you this question. I guess it really wouldn't be a question. Let me just say hello to you. Hey yo,
the bad guy. Yeah, man, it's funny because I don't remember if we talked about this on a previous episode or if we just talked offline about this, but Scott Hall, you could make the argument that he didn't need it. And I can see that. I think it's probably because we were so used to seeing him in the mid-card title picture with the IC belt. But, at the same time that he was in the mid-card, he was still also in the main event a lot with Michaels and Diesel and the 1-2-3 Kid and some rivalries with Money Inc. He had the potential. He could have carried the company on his back. He could have been the face of the company. He was over as a face and a heel. He could work. He had a finisher that was not kicked out of, ever. Again, it doesn't mean if he hit it, it was over. There's always interference and schmazes and things like that. But he just had it all, and I think it's like so many on this list. It's a victim of circumstance. He was behind Diesel. He was behind Shawn Michaels.
Yokozuna.
Behind Bret Hart. Yeah, Yokozuna. So
especially when he was really a heel, I think that when he fought, I think this is what you were kind of alluding to, is last week or the week before we talked about Bret Hart facing Razor Ramon at 93's Rumble. That's a credible opponent that Bret could have very easily lost that title to. And especially when the guy was, the bad guy dripping with machismo and gold. He was wearing 47 necklaces to the ring, rivaling Mr. T. And he was an Intercontinental Champion at one point. When he wore that title, it looked good. He very easily could have put that wing title on his body. And
hell yeah.
He could have carried the company, I think, just as well as someone like a Steve Austin as a face. What if he had stayed? What if he had never left WWE and he stayed there? Could they have made him a world champion? Do you think he could have been in that era? I think his time was starting to become a touch stale unless he made a drastic turn like he did by doing the whole NWO angle. A boat that was missed was in WCW. I think they could have very easily put the title on him at some point.
Right, and they just kept the tag
maybe
titles
even
on.
before Hogan. I think the shock value of Hogan joining NWO was big. What if Hogan helped Scott Hall dethrone the Giant instead of vice versa? He could have been made, but it's fucking Hogan. Again, it's like those victim of circumstances, and I think Scott Hall very easily, face or heel, definitely a guy who should have held that world championship. You and I are definitely in agreement on that one. And our final 3, one of my favorite heels of all time. We talk about Velveteen Dream saying, "Call me up, Marina." Well, this is going all the way back to the man who put Jake Roberts' wife on his tights, as well as any one of his opponents all the time. We're talking about the Ravishing Rick Rude. Man, put a world championship on him. When he was the Intercontinental Champion, he was booed. He didn't even need a title when he was booed. That's the one thing I will say. He's one of the guys that maybe didn't need it.
Sure.
But he gave Warrior all of his best matches. When Warrior and him were fighting for Intercontinental title and world title, he gave Warrior all of his best matches. He went to WCW and unfortunately ended his career early with a back injury.
In Japan against Sting.
But it was I believe it was a WCW event. It was like something like that, or maybe they were just doing a quick tour over there. However, he was the WCW International World Champion. This is one of the ones that you and I talked about last week. Does it count? Does it not? No, it doesn't, because there was only like 3 or 4 world champions out of that entire thing, and 2 of them were the same guy. I think Sting held it twice. It ended up being merged. It was kind of a secondary world title, so I don't think it's going to be called a counting type thing. Call it the NXT title, if you really will, at that point. Rick Rude, really a great heel. He could have very easily been a world champion. Again, take out the circumstances, yada, yada, as we keep saying. Man, now it's time for all of you sweat hogs overweight. Man, he used to piss everyone off. And, you know, he made the guys hate him and the women want him.
Yep.
And it's a hell of a world champion. He didn't even have to even do anything. He didn't even do a move, and everybody was already booing him. You put a world championship on him, again, a good heel like that, always being the cowardly kind of guy, too, you know, like where Heenan could have helped him retain that title. Him and Savage, again, another credible thing. When Savage was a world championship, or when Savage was world champion, instead of feuding with some of the guys he did, he could have had a great feud with Ravishing Rick Rude. But at that time, Rude was also feuding with Warrior for the Intercontinental title. My point is that Rude, I think both companies, WWF and WCW, missed the boat on him. Unfortunately, by the time he could have been a world champion, again, he was injured. Of course, still well known for being the only man that really was on both shows same night, Nitro and Raw.
There you go.
I still remember watching that and going, someone's not live.
Yeah.
Number 2, I'll let you talk about. We talk about this guy a lot because for good reason. He really is just fucking perfect.
Perfect, absolutely. And he's almost in the same category with Rick Rude, I think.
I totally agree. When I was looking at them, they either one could have been 2 or 3 when I put this list together.
Yeah, I think you and I are in the same boat that he's number 2 because he would be our preference of the 2. Nothing against Rick Rude. He was fantastic. Like you said, he gave Warrior all of his best matches. Mr. Perfect was just heel Bret Hart almost. Just with a slightly different gimmick. If Bret Hart held the title, there's no reason Mr. Perfect couldn't hold the title. That's my argument right there, and I'm done.
No, I don't even have to say more of that. I absolutely agree. I couldn't even say any more. Number 1, really, we're just gonna go right into it. Honestly, I think one of the biggest contenders that should have taken that title from Hogan, if we're not going to talk about Andre. I mean, we talk all the way back to the War to Settle the Score, things like that, all those MTV and rock and wrestling crossovers.
Cyndi Lauper.
The biggest name that was in around that time was the Rowdy one. Roddy Piper. I think one of the biggest things that probably took him away from maybe even becoming a champion was the fact that he went Hollywood. He was in movies. They Live, Body Slam. You know, he was all over the place. So I really was mad that he never was a world champion as I really thought about it. And one of the biggest things is I think that WCW actually could have capitalized on that when he came over in 96. I know that people were not fans of him being over there at that time because as time was done. Okay, well, your last 3 champions or so were Flair, Savage, and Hogan, so I don't think it really makes that much of a difference. I remember asking, I always talk about this, right? You know, I remember asking my family, can I please get this pay-per-view? Well, you just got that WWF one last week. What's WCW? It was the first time I ever ordered a WCW pay-per-view. Was Starrcade 96. I just the you know how you get to watch the countdown show for free on the pay-per-view channels back in the day, and I was watching it and I was like, I gotta see this. Even though I knew it was a non-title match, it seemed really big. And also that night was Luger taking on the Giant. It was a really good card. I love Starrcade 96. For my money, both that and 97 are 2 of my favorite WCW pay-per-views. And in the main event, Roddy Piper puts Hogan to sleep with the sleeper hold, and referee, you know, does the 3 full arm drags, you know, 1, 2, and as it drops on 3, even the referee looks and goes, oh, okay, calls for the bell. Only issues I really wish they should have put that title on the line. It was huge. They played off of Piper's bad hip, the whole storyline, everything. He could have been a world champion right there. Then again, he could have dethroned Hogan back in the day too. One thing you got to remember, Piper went most of his entire career not being pinned. Most of his career. He put over Bret Hart for the Intercontinental title, but most of his career, his shoulders never stayed down for a full 3 seconds. How is that guy not a world champion? That should be a world champion that you chase. he did some controversial things, but he also did some awesome things too. Two of my favorite things from him, and I don't know, I'm going to preface that word favorite, but it's controversial, was WrestleMania 6. Him and Bad News Brown painted half of his body with fucking shoe polish and just went half black in that controversial WrestleMania 6 match. Well, joke was on him. Go back and listen to some interviews about that or read up on it. Shit didn't come off. He had to go all the way back through the subway and everything like that the rest of the night. So joke was on him. He thought it was fun for the moment, and that wasn't coming off.
Yep.
But man, who could ever forget Piper and Goldust, man? The Hollywood backlot brawl.
Oh my God,
really
that's right.
Punching each other hard. I mean, he broke his knuckle on Goldust's fucking head. And then they did that famous O.J. Simpson
the
car spot, which I thought was awesome. And it's funny because they even go, this looks a little familiar. I love that they even played into it. I was like, that's really cool, man. Way to play off of that whole thing. But man, Piper really could have been a world champion. The way he could piss a crowd off or get the crowd on his side. That's my point. Look he did that whole Bad News Brown thing where he was so over against Goldust. But against Hogan, that guy was booed out of every arena. He had sodas thrown at his head. Could have been a world champion.
Too.
Yeah, man. And you even hear it in our top topic. Just when you think you have the answers, I change the questions. I mean, the guy is a genius. Sad that he passed away. I'll never forget when he passed away. I was laid up, kind of going through remission and everything. I remember getting the text, and I was like, no. I was so sad, and I ended up throwing on a couple of matches. And then just recently, here's a little throwback for you. Did you know he was in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
No.
Oh, go back and watch that. He's a wrestler. He plays a wrestler. Got to check it out. If anybody has not had the opportunity to see Roddy Piper in the hit TV show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, he plays a wrestler, and we'll say a homeless one at that. It's awesome. But it's Roddy Piper, so you're like, it's believable.
Yeah, it was exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Man, awesome topic today. I was glad we got to talk about a lot of these guys because unfortunately they're names that when we start doing some of these lists, they're not going to make. When we talk about certain matches, certain stables, certain teams, things like that, a lot of these guys, unfortunately, were excluded. Why were they? Let me ask you guys, message us. What do you think? Why do you think some of these guys didn't make the cut as actual world champions? Or do you think that if anybody on this list really should not have made the cut? Because I know that O.D.M's not exactly happy that Hacksaw Jim Duggan even made the fucking honorable mention, let alone the list. So
seriously, dude.
But my match of the week that I want to recommend to everybody out there, this one is from the LA Sports Arena. It was in July of 1998. We're talking about two of the greats that never held a world championship. Matter of fact, this match wasn't even for a title. This match is Ravishing Rick Rude taking on Jake the Snake Roberts. 20-minute classic between these guys. No world title needed. That's kind of one of the best things about both Rude and Roberts, I guess, that if you really need to say, they, I guess, didn't need it throughout their career to be remembered. I remember I had a history teacher that one time someone just said, hit the lights, or hit the lights, and he said, hit the lights, and I'm like, oh, you're a Ravishing Rick Rude fan. And, it's just, people knew him. People knew who Jake the Snake Roberts was. A lot of people know who he was, whether you were a wrestling fan or not. Putting these two guys out there, and they were never world champions, they're just eye-catching wrestlers. They had a great chemistry against each other, too. So I think you guys are definitely going to like watching this match. ODM, I know that you definitely will, too. Let's talk about what's to come in the next couple of weeks here before we do let you guys go. Next week, we are going to be talking about the top 20 match types or stipulations. So you have things like I Quit, Submission, Hell in a Cell, Last Man Standing, Paddle on a Pole, Contract on a Pole.
Judy Bagwell
on a forklift. A lot of great opportunities for her to maybe, I think she's probably going to be at like number 1 or number 2.
Probably. Right next to David Arquette.
It's a hat trick, right? That was a hat trick. Holy shit!
That's where you put in the ding, 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 ding.
Wow, we need to start having a thing goes David Arquette.
This is pretty
trick.
bad that you're going to have to come up with a David Arquette hat trick alarm sound effect.
I can't wait for next week. We're going to have one for that. Okay. But yeah, and then the following week, 2 weeks from today, we're going to be talking about the top 10 Elimination Chamber matches, because that following Sunday will be the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view. We'll get you prepped with some of the better Elimination Chambers back in the day. Some of the ones that, when you took those bumps, you actually did bleed. Who can ever really forget the time that in the very first one, Rob Van Dam tried doing his frog splash off the very top of one of the pods and crushes Triple H's throat. 3 weeks from today, we're going to talk about the top 20 debuts or crossovers. Sometimes a debut is just as impactful, but then we also have crossovers. People like Y2J coming over to Raw, or AJ Styles showing up at the Royal Rumble. A couple of big moments like that. And then we are going to talk about... this one's going to be a fun one. 4 weeks from today, the top 10 missed opportunities. We talked about one already today, Wade Barrett. That's a big missed opportunity. There's some other things that I think that we could definitely talk about that, like, how could you not have done it? Let's just talk. Maybe it could be the Royal Rumble of 2014, 2015. Either one of them are missed opportunities, right? A lot of big things. So we have great topics on the way. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, as always, here for the Top of Wrestling. I know that, again, I want to see if I can get them all right. You guys are probably joining us here today. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we got Spotify, we have iTunes, we have Google Play Music, Podbean. What am I missing, ODM? Did I get them all?
Yeah, that's all of the ways to listen to us. YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Podbean.
You're goddamn right.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even though I don't know how to use it.
And we did put up a picture just last week. Let me ask you guys, who's who? Who's ODM? Who's the Professor? There may be a little bit of facial hair in the way for everybody, maybe even a lucha mask, but you let us know who's who. We do appreciate you guys joining us again. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking wrestling talk to you guys, chatting wrestling talk to you guys. I bid you a farewell. I am Professor Rex Youngblood, and this week, ODM is going to leave us with 11 words.
Prince Balor will soon become the new leader of Undisputed Era.
I ain't your friend and you're not mine. This difference helps me cross the line. Every time I'm confronted, I'm unafflicted.